Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had a warp quirk part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story apprentice of anonymousamogus from 𝐴3. So let's start the video. Izuku never knew what true dread actually felt like. But if he had to guess, this situation must have been the closest thing to it. He was seated on a stretcher, clutching his All Might plushie with all the strength he had left. Police sirens echoed in the street, fires were being put out by heroes and firemen alike, and medical personnel flocked the area as they attended to the injured. The only consolation was that he himself didn't have any injuries. Even with the destroyed building just a short walk away from him and the clutter of shrapnel around the area, he miraculously survived. Well, in hindsight, it wasn't really a miracle. Izuku, it's gonna be all right, okay? You're a brave kid, Professor Shield said reassuringly and fondly ruffled his hair. Do you need anything? Despite all the chaos, Izuku heard the professor clearly, but he couldn't voice a reply. He cleared his throat and forced himself to form a coherent sentence. Only a raspy mule came out. Izuku was frustrated and he could already feel tears welling up in his eyes. Okay, you don't have to say anything. I'll fetch you a bottle of water, sound good? Knowing that he couldn't speak at the moment, he nodded dumbly. When the professor walked away, Izuku sniffed and tried to wipe away his tears. He might just be a 4-year-old, but his mom said he was stronger than that. Strong heroes never cry, they always smile no matter what. So, Izuku thought of a distraction just like Mom told him. When you feel sad, look for something that reminds you of what you love, she used to say. Looking around the city block, he spotted a tuft of blonde hair at the distance. All Might. That's right, during the villain attack, it was because of All Might that most of the civilians were uninjured. He was so cool when he smashed the giant villain. And Izuku also had an autograph. How could he have forgotten? The #1 hero was even bigger than Izuku had imagined. And he had a very powerful quirk. Your quirk is powerful too, his mind supplied. Yeah, he had discovered another aspect of his quirk today. He couldn't wait to show it to 𝐀𝐦. Izuku would ask his mom to bring him to his best friend's house. Professor Shield came back with a water bottle and a paramedic beside him. Izuku could easily tell by the professor's solemn expression that something wasn't right. He tried to convey the question with his eyes, but the man shook his head and offered him the bottle. You should drink water first, okay, Izuku? He took the offered water and gulped down a good portion of it. Whatever they would say next, Izuku knew that he wasn't going to like it, especially if it involved his mother. The professor sat beside him and put his arms around Izuku. He noticed the man faintly nod at the paramedic. Izuku, during the attack, you remember your mom was injured, right? He nodded. Well, we tried our best. Powerful healing quirks were on her, but your mom didn't make it, Izuku. His senses seemed to halt at that point. He didn't want to believe it. Mom said she would never leave him, that she'd cheer him on when he was titled as #1 hero. Mom even promised to sew him a hero costume. But none of those are plausible now. As his thoughts spiraled into regret, guilt, and anger, Izuku failed to notice the green glow coming from his palms. The professor stood up to avoid the viridian energy that swirled around him. As his quirk touched the things around him, they start to disappear into random locations. Izuku, please breathe with me. That was David Shield's voice. Izuku didn't recognize it though. His breaths were shallow as he clutched his plushie, a birthday gift from his mother. He wondered if this was the last birthday gift he would ever receive. But that train of thought was shattered as he felt a prick on his forearm. His wide, teary eyes stared at it for a moment, before finally closing to relive the painful memory of his mother's death in the form of a nightmare. It was supposed to be a perfect day. Izuku and his mother would meet one of 𝐴 top researchers, David Shield. When he manifested his quirk, the doctor that evaluated Izuku was astounded by his power and put him into contact with 𝐴 scientists. After all, his teleportation quirk had so much potential, and he had amazing control over it even as a 4-year-old. Relocate was what they called his quirk. It allows him to create a condensed orb of green energy from his palm that expands to become a portal after it's thrown at a certain direction. The doorway could lead anywhere as long as it is within Izuku's line of sight, and the size of the portal could be controlled. 𝐴 promised Izuku scholarships and stipends should his mother accept the offer. It was a wonderful deal for her child, and 𝐀𝐦 didn't hesitate to arrange a formal meeting with their representative. The appointment would include the signing of contracts and a demonstration of Izuku's quirk. Izuku, honey, remember what I said? His mother asked as they rode the elevator. The meeting would be hosted on a private room of the 5-star hotel they were in right now. No loud noises, no speaking out of turn, no running around, Izuku said as he listed the 3 rules on his fingers. Follow these rules and I'll buy you ice cream after our appointment, okay? Can I have strawberry? He asked with a small smile. His mother smiled fondly. Of course, honey. His mother crouched down and hugged the little bundle of joy. 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐿 nuzzled closer to his mom, crushing his All Might plushie between them. The soft ding of the elevator pulled them from the comforting moment, and they stepped onto the carpeted corridor to look for 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝐿. When they turned on a corner, they were greeted by a tall brown-haired man dressed in a sleek black suit. Good afternoon, Midoriya-san. The man greeted and shook 𝐻𝐻𝐿's hand. Crouching down, he smiled and added, and you must be young 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐿. It's a pleasure to officially meet you too. I'm 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝐿, and I will be overseeing 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐿's development on Island. Well, the pleasure is. An explosion cut off the response of 𝐻𝐻𝐻, as the wall a few meters beside them was now adorned by a large hole. 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐻 hid behind his mom and the professor stood protectively in front of them. Beneath the rubble, a hooded man with spider legs sprouting from his back stared at them with murderous intent. David was the first one to recover from the shock, and ushered all of them away from the obvious villain. 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐻 was struggling to keep up with the adults, so the researcher picked him up in one hand and dragged 𝐻𝐻𝐻 with the other. The villain was gaining on them, and they couldn't afford to look back. Only the inhuman screeching gave evidence that they were still being followed. Seemingly annoyed by the chase, the villain decided to throw a painting at the retreating figures, effectively tripping 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐻's mother. Mom, no kid. With adrenaline pumping within, 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐻 condensed a green ball of energy on his right palm and threw it at the villain. Too shocked to dodge, the hooded man was hit on his chest. With a sound of tearing paper, the spider Quirk user disappeared from their line of sight. What the? David stared wide-eyed. Your Quirk could do that? 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐻, are you all right? Are you hurt? 𝐻𝐻𝐻 stood up and looked over her baby. Seeing as there are no visible injuries, she sighed in relief. 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐻 hugged his mother tight and allowed her to carry him outside. The streets were chaotic, since everyone from the hotel vacated the premises after the emergency alarm. Turns out, a group of villains has attacked the neighboring support company building. Several heroes were already on the scene. We should move somewhere safe, Midoriya-san. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 merely nodded as she followed the scientist to a car. But once again, their steps were halted when a large chunk of the support building exploded, hurtling debris at the citizens below. Panicked screams echoed on the road, but 𝐬𝐻𝐻 ran forward with a glowing right hand. Just before the destroyed parts hit anyone, he managed to create a huge portal in front of them that transported the rubble to a safe distance. However, he failed to notice some stray metal that came from the side and impaled some people. One of them was 𝐬𝐻𝐻's mother. David's shield was stunned by the amount of blood pouring from 𝐻𝐻𝐻's body, and 𝐬𝐻𝐻 let out an unearthly shriek. Mom, no, 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 he sobbed as he kneeled in front of his mother. David took off his suit jacket and rushed to 𝐻𝐻's side to minimize the bleeding. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 caressed his mom's face, tears blurring his vision. He softly thrust the All Might plushie in her arms, surprised that he hasn't lost it yet. All Might kept me strong, so 𝐻𝐻𝐻 keep you strong too, Mom, he said softly. Sirens from both the police and ambulance were nearing them, and 𝐬𝐻𝐻 held on to hope that his mother's going to be okay. A large rumble sounded from behind them. Looking back, he could see the hero gang Orca and a villain who appears to have a gigantification quirk. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 vaguely wondered how the pro-hero would handle the problem. But a flash of blue and yellow appeared above the villain's head. It was All Might. He took down the giant with a single punch, and redirected its fall away from civilians. Everything happened too fast for 𝐬𝐻𝐻's eyes to follow. Moments later, all the villains were either unconscious or captured, courtesy of the #1 hero. As 𝐬𝐻𝐻 watched everything unfold around him, David assisted the paramedics as they put 𝐻𝐻's body on a stretcher. 𝐬𝐻𝐻, David caught his attention. Could you use your quirk to remove the metal from your mom? On the paramedic's signal, okay. The pole that was embedded on his mother's torso was half a meter long and with jagged sides. He couldn't imagine the pain his mom must be feeling, so he eagerly went to her stretcher. A green ball of energy emerged from his palm, and when the paramedic nodded at him, he softly touched the metal with it. With a gasp from his mom, the pole was removed and reappeared on the ground beside him. One of the paramedics with a healing quirk immediately used his power to try and repair the damage. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 was holding his mom's hand as they tended to her injury, while also gently stroking her hair. 𝐶UKU and 𝐻𝐻 began. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 looked up to his mother and cried harder. Mom, it's G going to be okay, all right? Why, you'll be healed, right? His mom didn't reply to any of his questions. Instead, she removed her hand from 𝐬𝐻𝐻's grasp and fondly stroked his green curls. Everything's going to be all right, honey. David will help you, and even All Might is here, she chuckled hoarsely. Isn't All Might your favorite hero? Go get an autograph from him while they try to heal me, okay? Try, his mom said. Even she didn't believe she'll get better. He didn't dare move away from her and whispered sadly, but you're my favorite hero, Mom. The choked sob his mom let out was unheard by 𝐬𝐻𝐻 as David approached them, with All Might on his side. At the presence of the #1 hero, 𝐬𝐻𝐻's mind was slightly put at ease. He stared with awe at the impossibly tall hero and lightly tugged at his mom's hand. And Mom, 𝐻𝐡𝐤 I am not dreaming, all right. 𝐴𝐻𝐦 smiled fondly at her child and replied, yes, honey, now why don't you get an autograph while I talk with the professor? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 numbly nodded his head and let All Might lead him somewhere else. It was after he received an autograph and a hug from the #1 hero when the paramedics became frantic around his mom. 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐸 was pronounced dead at 11:33 due to severe blood loss and organ failure. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 awoke with a jolt. A white ceiling greeted him along with the smell of antiseptic and alcohol. He groaned at his predicament, not yet remembering why he was here in the first place. The shuffling of the door alerted him somewhat, and Professor 𝐲𝐸 entered the room. You're awake, I see. How are you feeling? My head hurts a little, but that's it, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 said. How about you? Are you injured, Professor 𝐲𝐸? He continued with a smaller voice. The professor smiled, but the gesture didn't reach his blue eyes. You can call me David, young 𝐬𝐻𝐸. Professor D. David, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 pressed. He doesn't want to seem disrespectful to a renowned scientist. Mom always told him to respect his elders. I guess that's fine. Do you remember what happened? When everything returned to his memory, his thoughtful expression was replaced by a solemn one. Is Mom really gone? He whispered in a broken voice. She said she won't leave me alone. The paramedics didn't heal her right. Powerful healing quirks should be able to heal her. He's in denial. He was aware of it. Even as he said all those things with conviction, he knew that what's done could never be undone. The professor stayed silent, not replying to any of his questions. What happens to me now? Am I going to be homeless? Tears streamed down his face once more, the thought of defeat plaguing his mind. No, God, 𝐬𝐻𝐸, I'd never let that happen. David 𝐲𝐸 walked towards the bed and sat on a stool beside it. He can't bear to see a hurting child, especially someone who was younger than his daughter. Your mom, before she passed, was able to give a recorded consent regarding the contract that she wasn't able to sign. You will officially become an 𝐸 citizen if you want. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 looked at the professor. Are you sure 𝐸 still wants me? David 𝐲𝐸 nodded. But before that happens, the contents of the contract should be known to one 𝐵𝘃𝐸 Mitsuki. Do you know who that is? Auntie Mitsuki is 𝐾𝐻𝐸's mom. At the confused face of Professor 𝐲𝐸, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 added, 𝐾𝐻𝐸 is my best friend, and Auntie Mitsuki is Mom's best friend. She should know what happened. Will you be all right here alone? If you want, we could both go to their house. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 shook his head. No, you should tell Auntie now, as she'll know what to do. And I want to be alone for now, I understand. Professor 𝐲𝐸 left the room afterwards, giving 𝐬𝐻𝐸 time to think and perhaps accept what happened. He grabbed his All Might plushie from the bedside table and laid down the bed, hugging it tightly. He could still smell a faint scent of the perfume his mom uses. A nurse brought him food sometime later, but he didn't have the appetite. Usually, his mother would cook him katsudon if he wasn't feeling well. But that won't happen ever again. He'll surely miss her delicious cooking, and her nightly cuddles, her morning kisses. His inner rambling was interrupted by the crash of his door. At first he thought it was another villain, but he saw the worried scowl of 𝐾𝐻𝐸, as well as Auntie Mitsuki, who looked like she had been crying. Considering the situation, he was certain that his assumption was correct. 𝐾𝐻𝐸, what did I say about opening doors? 𝐾𝐻𝐸 replied with an indistinguishable grumble that vaguely sounded like knock first, then open it slowly. The pair walked towards 𝐬𝐻𝐸's bed, and Auntie wrapped 𝐬𝐻𝐸 in an affectionate hug before greeting. Hey there, 𝐬𝐻𝐸, how are holding up? She said in an impossibly soft voice for a 𝐵𝘃𝐸 standard, even though Auntie appeared to be cheery. He knew that she was also hurting. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 just wiped his tears instead of answering. I talked with David 𝐲𝐸, you know him, right? When 𝐬𝐻𝐸 nodded, she continued. Well, your mother has already agreed to the contract of 𝐸. They'll take care of you, help you train your quirk, and even give you scholarships. But if you're not comfortable, you can stay with us, and you can simply reclaim your place in 𝐸 after you heal. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 considered this for a moment, before his mind repeated Auntie Mitsuki's words. Mom had already agreed for him to live in 𝐸. She had faith in him, and put his future in the hands of the smartest researchers of the world. I think I want to go to 𝐸. He looked up, his eyes flaring with determination and guilt. Mom thinks I'm ready for it, and she trusted Professor David to look after me. I'll train my Q quirk on 𝐸, and I will be a hero that can help everyone. Mitsuki fondly smiled at him and ruffled his hair. I knew you'd say something like that. Now I need to talk to 𝐲𝐸. Katsuki will keep you company, okay? At this, she turned to her son, soft voice replaced with her usual tone. Keep 𝐬𝐻𝐸 safe, and don't do anything stupid, you brat. When Mitsuki left, 𝐾𝐻𝐸 sat at the stool with a deep scowl. Mom said you have to go somewhere far and live with nerds. Do you really want that, stupid Zuko? They're scientists, 𝐾𝐻𝐸, not nerds. And besides, they'll help me train my quirk and make lots of inventions with it. ch. That's stupid. We could just train here together so I could beat you every day. You don't need dumb scientists to make your flashy quirk stronger, he said with his palms popping small explosions. Izuku's eyes slightly widened and he got a tiny bit excited. A distraction really could be the difference between self-loathing and momentary joy. 𝐻𝐻𝐿, that reminds me. I discovered a new use for my quirk. When 𝐻𝐻𝐿 just looked at him, he created a green void orb on his palm and let it touch his 𝐬𝐻𝐢 plushie. The toy reappeared by the door with a ripping sound. Whoa, you can do that now. See 𝐻𝐻𝐿, when I go to 𝐸 Professor David can help me find new ways to use my quirk. And then we could be the best heroes that will save everyone. The smile on Izuku's face might as well be sunshine incarnate. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 didn't argue with him after his declaration. Later that day, Mitsuki and 𝗍𝗲𝗍𝐿 returned to tell Izuku they would leave for 𝐸 next week after his mother's burial. Turns out, the paperwork for Izuku's transfer was easily finished, considering the influence of the scientists, and even a personal recommendation from All Might. Izuku was ready to leave Japan. Yesterday might have been one of the worst days of his life, but the next few days will mark a new beginning. Equipped with determination and an extremely powerful quirk, Izuku would try his hardest to reach his full potential, and when he returns to his motherland, the villains wouldn't know what hit them. The sunrise from atop Central Tower never failed to amaze Izuku. Red, orange, and even pinkish hues fill the sky as he watched with silent awe. Today is a big day, and what a great way to start it. Well, not as big as 𝐸, but big nonetheless. He was sure he heard the preparations in the space travel sector. But up here on the highest point of the island, only the humming wind is his company. It's been 10 years since Izuku came here, and 𝐸 had nothing been short of wonderful. He lived with 𝗍𝗲𝗍𝒄 and was officially adopted by the professor after his 7th day on the island. He also had a sister, Melissa, who was 2 years older than him. It was kinda awkward at first, since he hasn't known them long when they became family, but it worked out in the end. Professor David, well, Dad, always liked to spoil Izuku, even though he insisted otherwise. Even Melissa treats him like a porcelain doll sometimes just to make fun of him. I'm not delicate, Nissan. I can protect myself and others too, a 6-year-old Izuku once told Melissa. Well, while you protect others, I will protect you. You're my little brother Zuko, and you can never stop me from caring. It was safe to say that Izuku cried at that moment. He still missed his mom, but living with his newfound family eased his mind. He knew Mom would have also loved them if she was still alive. Every year, Izuku visits Japan with his family to pay respects on his mother's death anniversary. 𝐻𝐻𝐿, Auntie Mitsuki, and Uncle Masaru also came with them. Afterwards, Izuku and 𝐻𝐻𝐿 would spar, checking each other's progress in combat. His best friend was definitely strong, and the sheer force of his quirk is scary when you're up against it. Still, Izuku manages to win by simply tossing or touching his void orbs at 𝐻𝐻𝐿, transporting him away from the fight. Through technicality, this counts as a win, but his best friend doesn't really see it that way. When we become pro heroes, are you just gonna fucking teleport villains away from the fight? That doesn't count as a win, you coward. His taunts passed on deaf ears. The adults would simply snicker at their antics, but poor Melissa was horrified that the blonde might actually explode at his brother. That never happened though, much to her and Izuku's relief. Life really was great to Izuku, but not so much when his peaceful thoughts were interrupted by a loud alarm. He got up with a startled shriek. The alarm on his phone was loud and annoying, but also very helpful since he forgot the time. Oh gosh, I'll be late for breakfast. Without hesitation, Izuku jumped off the roof of the central tower. Not to die, of course, but simply to experience the euphoric feel of falling endlessly. Hurling himself atop high places probably wasn't the best coping mechanism when he feels stressed, but he couldn't find it in himself to stop. After all, there's no risk of injury when he could simply reappear anywhere he wanted. Bracing himself, Izuku rolled sidewards midair and created a void orb on his palm. When he grasped the energy, he rematerialized at the base of the tower. The roll broke his momentum and he stood upright to see the startled faces of patrolling guards. He didn't wait for them to recover from the shock as he sprinted away with a parting message. Sorry to startle you again, Mr. Besson. Have a nice day. Izuku switched between jogging and opening portals to shorten his travel. Through experimentation, he found out that the maximum distance he could open portals is his line of sight. Anything further and he must risk opening a portal with something on the way. And he would be quickly exhausted even if the portal didn't manifest because of a hindrance. It was 7:30 when Izuku reached his home, a modern 2-story American house, painted in white. He was about to open the front door when he was greeted by the smiling face of his sister. Looking at her, she had a calculating gleam in her eyes that scared Izuku a little. Let me guess, you watched the sunrise from the highest point of Central Tower. You were having a peaceful moment when the alarm I set on your phone rang. You jumped off the skyscraper, and you ran a marathon so that you could still have breakfast before your demo. Am I right? Izuku stared at her dumbfounded. Are you sure you don't have a mind-reading quirk? Nissan? You know I'm quirkless, silly. She giggled and took out something from her pocket. I used the power of science. Oh, what? It was her phone that she showed him. On the screen displayed a blinking red light that 𝐬𝐻𝐻 assumed was himself. You were tracking me, but I thought I already removed the bug you put on my phone. She gasped. So that's why I can't track your phone. Can I come in now? He deadpanned. Oh yeah, sorry about that. After changing into some indoor shoes, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 sat down the couch and looked expectantly at his sister. Still, the tracking device you put on me doesn't explain how you knew everything I was doing. That was just me working on logic. And the device also records altitude. Imagine my surprise when I see it rapidly going down before you disappeared. But then you reappeared on the ground and I deduced you just jumped off and decided to teleport on the last moments. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 considered this for a moment before humming. So, where did you put the tracking device this time, Nissan? I'll tell you if you promise not to remove it. Why do you need to track me though? Melissa thought for a moment, tapping her pointer finger at her chin. Cause my overprotective sisterly instinct told me so. Don't worry, I promise to use it only when you are in trouble. He sighed, knowing his sister would just find another object to plant the tracking device on. Okay, I won't remove it. It's in your watch. Now let's go have some breakfast. Only at the mention of food did 𝐬𝐻𝐻 notice the fragrant smell coming from the kitchen, as well as the sound of something being fried. An omelet, he guessed. The meals he have with his family are mostly American food, with the occasional katsudon. Melissa guided him to the kitchen, taking a turn on the corner of the living room. Good morning, Dad, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 greeted when he entered the kitchen. Oh, 𝐬𝐻𝐻, back from your morning run I see. And morning suicide too, Melissa said with a grin. What? After a lengthy explanation of what morning suicide meant, the trio finally sat down to have breakfast. The meal was quiet, like it frequently was. When they were done, the silence was broken by David as he cleared his throat. 𝐬𝐻𝐻, you should start preparing for the demonstration. I already put the clothes you'll wear on your bed. Thanks, Dad, I'll change right away, he said and put his dishes on the sink before retreating to his room. His preparations were fast. By the time he was done, his dad and Melissa still haven't gone out of their rooms yet. This has always been the case when they leave together. While 𝐬𝐻𝐻 waited for them, he sat on the beige couch and turned on the television. He knew they would take their time considering there were still 2 hours left before the demo, so he scrolled through the channels without worry. There was nothing interesting enough to hold 𝐬𝐻𝐻's attention, so he settled for 𝐻𝐻. It was a local channel in 𝐻 that showcased some of its inventions and developments to hype the citizens for the 𝐻𝐸xpo. 𝐬𝐻𝐻 has been showcased in the channel once, all thanks to the diligent researchers willing to learn about his quirk. When 𝐬𝐻𝐻 arrived at the island, 3 departments were assigned to study his teleportation quirk. The Sustainable Energy Development Division was tasked by the Island Council to replicate the constant kinetic energy from 𝐬𝐻𝐻's void orbs. They hypothesized that since it has the ability to power specialized motors, it could be the answer to an infinite source of power. However, they're still in the development phase even after a decade of study. Another department dedicated to 𝐬𝐻𝐻's warp quirk is the support hub. Unlike the SEDD, they have actually created a support item that makes use of 𝐬𝐻𝐻's void orbs. Warp Canister was the name of the gadget. It resembles a small water tumbler containing 𝐬𝐻𝐻's void orb. Multiple canisters were made, but each canister can only be used once, and only transports a person on the location encoded on the canister. After a single teleportation, the canister must be refilled with 𝐬𝐻𝐻's void orb. The support item wasn't mass-produced yet, but once SEDD manages to replicate his void orbs, the gadget will be available to heroes worldwide. And now we bring you the latest on the space travel sector, the voiceover on the television said. Even though it was English, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 could understand it perfectly. He focused his attention when he heard it. 2 hours from now, the space travel sector, also known as SDS, will have a demonstration on their latest venture, Project Galaxy Warp. According to the head scientist, Dr. Harlasher, this might be the greatest invention for space travel and analysis. This project was in development since the arrival of 𝐬𝐻𝐻 Midoriya, a Japanese citizen who is now the adoptive son of Dr. David Shield. 3 years ago, it was also the young boy's quirk that allowed the creation of warp canisters from the support hub. Stay tuned to 𝐻𝐻 and we will broadcast the live demo of SDS. Coming up, 𝐬𝐻𝐻 turned off the television when he heard doors closing upstairs. So, they'll televise the whole thing later. What a nightmare. Somehow he wasn't as excited to go knowing he would be watched. He shuddered at the thought and didn't realize that his dad and Melissa were watching him. What's the matter, 𝐬𝐻𝐻? The childlike squeak he let out did not go unnoticed, judging by his sister's giggle. Dad, I didn't know they would televise the demo. He murmured the last part while touching his pointer fingers together. David laughed heartily. Don't worry about that. You've been in 𝐻𝐻s before, right? When they covered the warp canisters. And I thought that would be last. Oh come on 𝐬𝐻𝐻. It's not like you have something to be embarrassed about. You're a cute baby with a powerful warp quirk. And your outfit suits you too, Melissa assured him and put her hands around his shoulder. You really think so? he asked, staring down at his clothes. He wore dark jeans and black shoes, with a tucked-in green long-sleeved formal shirt folded up to his elbows. "Yeah, so let's go. I want to see Project Galaxy Warp," Melissa said as she pushed Izuku out of the house. An amused David Shield followed closely behind. When they arrived at the lab, they were greeted by Dr. 𝐻𝐿. "Professor Shield." The doctor nodded as a way of greeting. "Midoriya, how are you feeling today? No unforeseen migraines, I hope." "I am quite all right, Dr. 𝐻𝐿. Thanks for asking." Izuku scratched his neck shyly. "Is there anything I could be of assistance, doctor?" David asked. "Oh please, your guest's here today." "Well, apart from Midoriya here. So, if you would excuse us, we still need your son for some preparations." David nodded and guided Melissa to the observation deck. The laboratory is circular and painted in stark white. Observers were stationed a floor above them, overlooking the entire lab through reinforced glass. Several personnel and scientists of the SDS were milling around and preparing the void generator. It's a machine designed to contain Izuku's void orbs and harness their energy to create portals with the help of a portal modulator. In previous experimentations, it has been confirmed that the void generator could open a portal anywhere around the globe with the correct coordinates. However, this discovery hasn't been publicized due to the dangers it would pose on Izuku. "Okay, put these on and we'll get started," Dr. 𝐻𝐿 said as she gave Izuku his lab coat and a pair of safety goggles. Once he was done, the atmosphere in the lab became serious, and the cameras started rolling. "Demonstration will now begin, Midoriya, if you would please." He nodded and proceeded to the back of the void generator. It was a large machine, even taller than Izuku was. 3 palm-sized tunnels were staring at him, and he let his right palm accumulate energy. The void orbs were then inserted into each tunnel. Izuku's emerald energy must not touch the machine, so they hover within the holes through the use of electromagnetism. The tunnel lit up in bright green stripes, and reinforced glass sealed the orbs. 3 void orbs are now in electromagnetic confinement. "Beginning energy transfusion," a male scientist said, and typed something on the holographic computer beside the machine. Izuku came back beside Dr. 𝐻𝐿 as the void generator whirred. All of the energy from his void orbs are being channeled to a cannon-like device, the portal modulator, Izuku recalled. "Portal modulator is now fully charged. Vacuum chamber now closing," another scientist declared. A reinforced glass cage emerged from the ceiling and enclosed a square-shaped area with the portal modulator at its edge. Hissing sounds filled the laboratory as the experimentation zone was sealed. "Oxygen and nitrogen levels are steadily decreasing," a robotic female voice supplied through the speakers. "All gas particles are now extinguished within the glass cage. Commence portal creation." At the signal, the portal modulator lit up with green streaks. The nozzle shoot out a steady stream of green and black energy. A portal materialized 3 meters away from the portal modulator and opened the gates of the cosmos. Awe filled the room, and the observers were all clapping. The scientists and staff stared at the view with teary eyes. A decade of hard work and dedication had granted them a sight that only astronauts used to see. The green portal was opened 100 meters away from one of 𝐸 satellites. It overlooked the green and blue expanse of Earth, a planet so big for its inhabitants, but incredibly insignificant to the entirety of the cosmos. It truly was beautiful to see the land they live in. Izuku has seen this sight many times along with the scientists in this room, but the happiness of sharing their work still made him tear up as he gazed on his planet. Dr. 𝐻𝐿 hugged Izuku tightly, and he laughed before nuzzling closer. After they exchanged warm smiles, the doctor turned to the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, we can now finally reach space without rocket science. This is the dawn of a new age. Space travel has never been easier." Izuku is panting and slick with sweat. Never has he felt this helpless. One wrong move and it would be the end for him. His opponent was powerful and relentless. Izuku never faced someone like him. This must be how 𝐻𝐿 felt when they sparred. A foe capable of switching positions fast is hard to hit. But he won't give up. His opponent is also heaving like him. This could be anyone's win. Although it should be noted that only Izuku was actually suffering from hits, his opponent was just exhausted from the long battle. "Are you quite all right, Midoriya-kun? We can call this a draw and spar again later," the cheery voice of his sparring partner said between breaths. "I'll be fine, 𝗀𝗀𝗧-senpai. I want to be able to defeat someone as strong as you," Izuku replied with vigor, despite being out of breath. He wanted to make his family proud who were watching on the sidelines, as well as prove himself to All Might by besting his personal student. Uncle Toshi and 𝗀𝗀𝗧-senpai arrived at 𝐸 earlier that day for an official matter regarding Izuku. The 5 of them spent the day going all around 𝐸, until the boys decided they want to spar. 𝗀𝗀 looked ready to end the match, and Izuku won't back down either. The blonde smiled, and his body sparked yellow as he dashed at his opponent. Out of paranoia, Izuku made a void orb and attempted to grab it for teleportation. However, he was hit on his stomach before he could grasp the energy, and his void orb disappeared. It was a painful strike, and he almost toppled over, but he managed to stay standing. Izuku's eyes focused on Tagada's confused form just a few steps away. The blonde was staring at his fist like it committed a crime, which was ridiculous since that punch was painful as heck. Making use of Tagada's distracted state, Izuku produced a void ball on both hands. He threw one at his opponent and grasped the other to teleport behind Tagada. The taller male dodged the void orb and phased through Izuku's roundhouse kick. Annoyed that his plan didn't work, Izuku repositioned his feet to backflip away from Tagada. The blonde followed his opponent with yellow sparks lighting his body. Izuku was definitely panicking, so without anything on his mind, he threw a void orb even though he knew it would just pass through Tagada. The energy did phase through, but the orb enlarged and teleported Tagada outside the ring. Everyone stared wide-eyed with mouths open. Even the sparring partners didn't know what happened. They clearly saw the energy phase through. "I swear, I don't know how that happened," Izuku said, shocked. "Well, whatever happened there, a win is a win. Congratulations, Midoriya-kun." Tagada smiled as he stood up from outside the ring. Izuku smiled back and scratched his head sheepishly. "Thanks, Tagada-senpai. Now that you're done, I say it's time for dinner," supplied All Might. Everyone nodded in confirmation, and they headed out the private gym after the two sparring partners changed clothes. The ride toward S.H.I.E.L.D. residence was filled with laughter and light conversation. When they arrived, All Might shrunk into his true form to help Melissa and David in the kitchen. The S.H.I.E.L.D. family already knew of the injury that the #1 hero sustained. After all, All Might was healed in Island after his battle. Only the council and the few doctors that assisted in his recovery had idea of what happened to All Might. Even fewer people knew who injured the hero, and Izuku wasn't one of them. Well, it's not time to ponder about the past. So Izuku took a shower after Tagada came out of the bathroom. Apparently, the two of them weren't allowed to help on the kitchen since they should rest, so they settled on the couch to watch TV. Izuku gave Tagada the remote, and to his horror, his senpai settled on updates. It was showing a replay of yesterday's live broadcast of the space travel sector. Tagada watched with awe, as Izuku shrunk himself from embarrassment. Is that how he looked like on TV? He was smiling the whole time, and it looked so cheesy even to him. The groan he let out was not ignored by Tagada. "What's wrong, Midoriya-kun? It's just that I never liked being on TV. I smile all the time and it looks cheesy." Izuku pouted and folded his feet. "Oh, by the way, I thought all inventions regarding your quirk are kept secret. Why is this project televised, then?" "The information they televise doesn't leave Island, and the citizens here aren't allowed to record it either. That's why the paperwork is so grueling when entering the island when it's not Expo," Izuku informed with a smile. Tagada hummed thoughtfully at that, but any response he was about to say died when David called them to the dining room. Dinner was finally served. When they were all seated, they said their thanks and began eating. They were in the middle of eating dessert, a strawberry shortcake, when David addressed Izuku. "Son, are you looking forward to studying in UA?" Yeah, sure," he replied pensively. The other four looked at each other, contemplating on what to say. It was Melissa that spoke. "You don't sound like you mean it, Zuko." The boy sighed at the accusation, knowing it was true. "It's just, I've always wanted to go to UA with my own power and hard work. Right now, it just feels like I'm a charity case that UA accepted because the Island Council compelled them to." After the successful demonstration of Project Galaxy Warp yesterday, his dad was called by the Island Council to discuss something. He wasn't really worried since his father was one of the 7 council members. He and Melissa just traded ideas for support items while waiting for their father. When their father returned, he told Izuku that the council wanted to have a meeting with him. Izuku was nervous at first, but then the meeting started and he was informed that he will be enrolled in UA. He was overjoyed, of course. His quirk is best used in the field after all, and he would be going to school with 𝐀𝐦. The entrance exam would surely be challenging, but with the training he had in Island, he should be fine. "When would I be leaving the island then?" "I still need to pass the entrance exam, so I would have to leave early," he told the council. "No, Midoriya, I think you misunderstood," one of the council members said. "You're already accepted in UA through recommendations. We sent a video of your quirk demonstration, as well as quirkless combat. Due to your importance in the research of Island, we must take extra security measures. You will only be allowed to leave when classes officially start." Izuku's face visibly fell at that. "I see." Earlier, his somber mood was lifted by the surprise visit of Uncle Toshi and his personal student, Tagada-senpai. All Might would be Izuku's official guardian when he returns to Japan for UA. The #1 hero was allowed to bring another one, and the pair would be tasked to escort Izuku. At the memory of what the council told him earlier today, Izuku lost his appetite even though strawberry shortcake is one of his favorite desserts. He really wanted to prove himself to UA. Now the faculty would think he had no actual potential. Even worse, what if his classmates thought that the council simply bribed the school so that he could study there? Toshinori sighed at how Izuku viewed the situation. Young Izuku, if you're worried that UA only accepted you because the council told them to, which isn't the case by the way, then you could prove yourself when the school year begins, surpass their expectations, and aim for the top. Izuku's doubtful expression was replaced with determination. That actually makes sense, and he would do just that. Thanks Uncle Toshi, I'll do my best then. So, Izuku, are you quite excited to study with Katsuki? He still doesn't know you'll be attending UA though, his father said after a sip on his glass of water. Yeah, of course. It'll be my surprise for Kakin, he replied with a grin. And you can finally confess your feelings for him, right Zuko? Melissa added with a grin of her own. The others perked up at that, but Izuku waved them off. You know it's not like that, Nissan. I see Kakin as my brother now, it's gross. His sister rolled her eyes, but then that curious glint came back like she just remembered something. Oh yeah, I totally forgot your heart is captured by the dual-haired boy from last year. She giggled at the redness of Izuku's cheeks. Dual-haired boy? David questioned. Remember that outdoor course we saw earlier? You know, where the challenger needs to destroy all robots in that rocky terrain with least possible time. Melissa informed Tabata and Toshinori. When the two nodded, she continued. Well, every year during the Expo, that course is open for everyone to test out. Ever since Izuku tried the course, he had always been the first place holder up until last year. Nissan, you don't have to tell them that. Izuku whined, but his sister merely shushed him. There was this boy who had red and white hair. He wielded a very powerful ice quirk. He simply created a giant glacier that obliterated all the robots within 14 seconds. It was only a second faster than Zuko. Can you believe it? A dual-headed boy with an ice quirk, you say? Toshinori said, looking at Tabata. That sounds a lot like Shoto Todoroki, Toshinori-san, Tabata supplied. Izuku looked at them wide-eyed. How do you know Shoto-kun? He ignored his sister's loud gasp at the familiarity, but he need not explain himself. Todoroki-kun was one of the recommended students that attended the recommendation exam 2 days ago. He is already enrolled in 1A, the same class as you, young Izuku, Toshinori informed him. Izuku, you'll explode if you keep getting flustered like that, his father teased him with a soft smile. The boy really was glowing red, and it didn't help that what his sister said was actually true. You guys are so mean, he pouted. The laughter of the other four echoed throughout the house, and Izuku couldn't help but smile. He really loved his family. Even Tabata-senpai, who he just met today, is also very nice to him. He secretly wished that it would stay like this forever. Toshinori breathed the evening breeze as he admired the small garden on the backyard of the Shield residence. After their dinner, Izuku and Melissa went to bed, while David checked on his project. On the other hand, Toshinori requested to have a talk with Tabata regarding his sparring match with Izuku. When the blonde boy finally stepped out of the back door, Toshinori gestured at him. I wanted to ask some things when you sparred with Izuku earlier. Oh, sure thing, Toshinori-san, Tabata replied cheerily, although in a quiet volume. I was wondering how Izuku managed to make his void orb teleport you when it already phased. Your quirk should have been amplified by one for all, making you invulnerable against everything. I also have no idea how that happened. When Izuku's quirk passed through me and quickly expanded, it was like his power was flowing through my entire being, shredding me and reforming my body somewhere else. That's certainly not how I feel when he teleports me. Perhaps it's only like that since your quirk should have been a natural counter to his, Toshinori guessed. Then, why didn't you use the strength aspect of one for all when you fought Izuku? He isn't so fragile that he will break when you use a mere 10% of it. Tabata sighed at this. That's just the thing, Toshinori-san. I've been using one for all every time I hit Izuku. But it's like he only takes damage from my regular punch. Toshinori choked on his breath and stared at his student. Are you saying that young Izuku is immune to the power of one for all? Well, I'm not saying that, but maybe something along those lines. Young Izuku's quirk really is a curious power. Toshinori must learn how the boy is unaffected by arguably the most powerful quirk in the world. The following day, Toshinori woke up around 6 a.m. to find Izuku already drinking hot chocolate. He greeted the boy and made himself some tea. After some time, the green-haired teen left for his morning jog. While Toshinori waited for the others to wake up, he looked through his phone messages to see if there were any emergencies. None arise at the moment. David and Melissa woke up almost at the same time and drank their coffee to start the day. Toshinori's friend told him that he would be needed in the lab, while Melissa tended to her father's latest project, whatever that was. When Izuku arrived, Tabata and Toshinori were both dressed for training. Oh, are we training again, Uncle Toshi? The boy asked as he drank a bottle of water. Yes, my boy. I wanted to test some of my theories regarding the interaction of your quirk and Mirio's. That's how the trio found themselves in the same gym as yesterday. Toshinori did experiments to see how Izuku's quirk would react with Tabata's. The boy created portals and threw void orbs, But every time, 𝗳𝗏 was still affected by teleportation, even though he phases through everything else. Even 𝐬𝐻𝐸 had no idea if it's just a recent development of his quirk that enables him to bypass the effects of others' quirks. Finally, they all accepted that somehow he could affect 𝗳𝗏 in his phasing state. So, 𝗳𝗏 finally conducted the experiment he was very curious with, to see if 𝐬𝐻𝐸 really is unaffected by One for All. "Young 𝐬𝐻𝐸, could I ask a favor from you?" "Sure, Uncle Toshi," he replied with a bright smile. 𝗳𝗏 felt slightly guilty taking advantage of 𝐬𝐻𝐸's innocent and friendly nature, but he needed answers. "Would you please block attacks from Mirio and tell me the difference of the force? I know it sounds weird, but I hope you would agree." Is that really it?" At the nod 𝐬𝐻𝐸 received from his uncle, he gave his affirmation. "Sure then, it's no big deal actually." 𝗳𝗏 sighed in relief and nodded at 𝗳𝗏. The blonde boy adjusted to a fighting stance and punched 𝐬𝐻𝐸's block. The shorter boy stumbled at the momentum, but he still stood his ground. 𝗳𝗏 then threw a second punch, this time powered by One for All. 𝗳𝗏 expected 𝐬𝐻𝐸 to at least fall down or blow away, but neither happened. The boy stood there just like when the first punch was delivered. "Did the force differ at all, Midoriya-kun?" 𝗳𝗏 asked. "I'm not exactly sure, but the difference between them should be minuscule. Though if I had to guess, the first one was slightly stronger, I guess. I don't really know." 𝐬𝐻𝐸 rambled. The student and teacher looked horrified at 𝐬𝐻𝐸's revelation. Maybe it was the shock that made 𝗳𝗏 ask if he could try and punch 𝐬𝐻𝐸's block. The poor boy was horrified by the request, but was also quite curious of how he would fare against the #1 hero. It was safe to say that all of them didn't expect the result. At contact, 𝗳𝗏 shrunk into his skeletal form, looking frantic at what just happened. We could continue tomorrow if you're already tired, Uncle Toshi," 𝐬𝐻𝐸 told him. The gaunt man nodded and looked at his student wide-eyed. 𝗳𝗏 wasn't tired at all, but when his fist made contact with 𝐬𝐻𝐸's arms, all the energy left his body. One for All seemed like it didn't want to hurt the green-haired boy. "This is a discovery that would shake the globe." He asked Gran Torino that night if it ever happened to Nana. It never did. If One for All could not hurt 𝐬𝐻𝐸, the same might be true with All for One. However, 𝗳𝗏 won't take the risk of that experiment. But it's not like he could still test it. His nemesis already met his demise. At least that's what he thought. Unbeknownst to 𝗳𝗏, an awful force was also brewing in Japan. A man of chaos was waiting for the opposing forces to return. And when his game starts, the world shall remember what dread truly is. It was approximately 2 weeks before classes began, when Aizawa memorized all the names and quirks of his students. Needless to say, this year's Class 1A sure was interesting. A group of diverse students, with some of the most unique quirks Aizawa has seen. 4 of them were particularly interesting. The brash first-place holder of the entrance exam, Katsuki Bakugo, would need serious help to tone down his anger issues. He's obviously talented in using his quirk, but his attitude would need a little adjustment to become a proper hero. Then there are also the recommended students. Momo Yoirazu had an extremely versatile quirk that she could use for combat, support, and rescue. She was also quite intelligent, judging by her grades from middle school. Shoto Todoroki had one of the most powerful quirks Aizawa had seen when it comes to raw power. Even though the boy appeared to be resisting the other side of his quirk, his control over ice is commendable. And of course, the last recommended student, Izuku Midoriya. The boy was an enigma. UAS information regarding him were limited to what the Island Council gave them. From the footages they sent, Midoriya seemed to have excellent control over his warp quirk. That doesn't mean he'd get special privileges from Aizawa though. If anything, the man wanted to test the boy even more so. See if he's actually deserving to be here. But that would have to wait for another day. Midoriya's flight was apparently delayed, so he would be absent for the first day of class. So much for first impressions. Aizawa could already envision Midoriya as a spoiled brat that thinks he's the most important person in the room. It might be true in Island, but there will be no tolerance in UA. Speaking of no tolerance, Aizawa certainly would not tolerate noisy students, no matter how powerful their quirks might be. His class stared at him dumbfounded as he unzipped his sleeping bag, before any of them could question his authority. He ordered them to wear their PE kits and meet him outside. Some of the students whined and complained because he didn't allow them to attend orientation, but he got them to shut up soon enough. Class 1A finally looked determined to prove themselves at the quirk apprehension test. But at the mention of immediate expulsion, they all became noisy yet again. The brunette, Uraraka, was particularly whiny. He simply twisted her words against her to shut her up, and anyone who dared oppose him again. Aizawa was finally ready to start the actual test, when another hand rose from the class. He wasn't paid enough for this. What is it, Yaoyorozu? If it's about questioning my methods again, then be my quest and leave, he sighed. I just have a question regarding the class, Mr. Aizawa. Shouldn't our class be filled with 20 students, just like Class 1B? The girl asked in a polite tone. Your class is comprised of 20 students, but your other classmate is absent for the first day. He'll be joining you tomorrow, but that would mean he wouldn't face the threat of expulsion. I'm not suggesting anything, but you might expel the wrong student, Mr. Aizawa, Ida said while waving his arms robotically. These kids don't let anything go past them. You don't need to worry about that. According to Principal Nezu, your last classmate is theoretically the most advanced out of all the first years. Do what you will with that information, because I'm still going to test him, just not today. When they didn't take the hint, Aizawa's eyes glowed red and his glare became murderous. The class was more than happy to comply after that. Everyone showed promise during the test. No one lacked potential, which was good news. The only problems were 𝐻𝐸𝐬𝐬's lack of skills and Minta's perverted tendencies. Now that we're finished, no one is getting expelled. That was just rational deception to make sure you'd all do your best. Aizawa grinned with manic eyes. He watched amused as Minta cried in relief. And Minta, you better behave yourself and don't make the girls uncomfortable. There will be consequences. He glared down at the grapehead who nodded frantically. After giving the class instruction regarding their syllabus, Aizawa left them to their own devices. He could finally have a nap now that the day is over, for his class at least. When he arrived at the teacher's lounge, he was greeted by Hisashi's smiling face. Hey 𝐲𝐸𝐬, All Might just called your phone, which you left here for some reason. He said your student Izuku Midoriya just arrived in Japan, and will be taking part in tomorrow's class, Hisashi informed with a grin. Good, I'm looking forward to testing that kid. Aizawa was too busy thinking of how to properly assess the boy's potential. He didn't notice the fear in Hisashi's eyes when he grinned like a maniac. The next day, Aizawa arrived at the classroom earlier than he needed to. Even Ida wasn't there yet. Students steadily poured in, and by the time of the bell, everyone was seated on their designated seats. If that Midoriya kid doesn't show up within the first 5 minutes of homeroom, the consequences would be dire. Just before he could begin roll call, there was a knock on the door. Speak of the devil, Aizawa actually was expecting Midoriya, so he didn't hesitate to put on his meanest glare when he opened the door. To avoid the prying eyes from the other students, Aizawa closed the door behind him. Unfortunately, Mirio Tagata was the student that took the brunt of his scrutiny, not Midoriya. Oh, good morning, Mr. Aizawa. Sorry if we interrupted something. I was just escorting Midoriya-kun since he hasn't familiarized the layout of the building yet, the blonde said with a smile too bright for Aizawa. Beside the tall teen was a green-headed boy, whose posture practically embodies nervous breakdown. Good morning, Mr. Aizawa, he greeted with a small wave and a wobbly smile. If he was being completely honest, Aizawa did not expect this sort of personality from the boy. He looked quite confident in the video demonstration. A sigh escaped Aizawa's lips as he gestured for the boy to follow. Thank you for bringing him, Tagata. I'll take it from here. When the blonde left, Aizawa told Midoriya to stay put, while he gave instructions to the rest of the class. Midnight would substitute for him while he conducts the quirk apprehension test on Midoriya. Aizawa assured his curious students that they would meet their classmate during the hero training after lunch. At the quirk apprehension test, Aizawa was wrong to doubt Midoriya. The boy had many uses for his quirk, and clearly knew how to take advantage of the situation. After all the tests, Midoriya's overall result placed him on second place, so this kid really was advanced in training. It would be amusing to see how the others would counter Midoriya's warp quirk during their battle training. Izuku was buzzing to attend UA. He finished packing his things 3 weeks before he was supposed to go. His dad and sister helped him with his stuff, and they even suggested he bring the most ridiculous of things. Melissa also insisted on putting a tracking device on every gadget he has on his person. David was quite supportive of his sister, so Izuku couldn't say no. A week left before class, Izuku thought that he would ride a plane or a private jet to get to Japan with Uncle Toshi and Tagata-senpai. But no, the Island Council was far too extra to consider such a simple and obvious method. They suggested he simply teleport to Toshinori's apartment, since all paperwork was already taken care of. It was also sort of a field test for the void generator. So, after he unpacked his things with Toshinori and Tagata, they returned to the Shield residence with using the void generator. Tomorrow would be his first day in class, and he couldn't wait to meet his classmates. He was especially excited to see Kaken's reaction, and he would meet Shoto-kun again. But his luck had always been terrible. When they were about to return to Japan, the void generator decided it to act up and malfunction. Travel through teleportation was no longer possible, so the council prepared one of their many private jets. Izuku's nerves were skyrocketing when he realized he'd be absent on his first day of class. He was already accepted in UA without participating in any exams. Now he wouldn't even be present for orientation. The universe really liked giving Izuku a hard time. This was just another reason to really prove himself. When Mr. Aizawa told him that they'll be conducting a quirk apprehension test, Izuku was honestly relieved. Considering his training on Island, a simple test like this would be much easier. And he was proven correct when he placed second on the class ranking. After their test, it was almost lunchtime, so Mr. Aizawa permitted him to eat early. He was about to go to the 1A classroom when he was stopped by his teacher. Mr. Aizawa handed him a suitcase containing his hero costume and told him to change in a different room compared to his classmate. When Izuku asked why, Mr. Aizawa looked him dead in the eye and deadpanned so that you could surprise those brats and show them what the real deal looks like. Izuku was pretty sure he just received a compliment. Pride swelled inside him and he was unable to form coherent words to convey his thanks to Mr. Aizawa. The scruffy man just waved him off and pointed to the locker room where he could change alone. Izuku's gear was created by his father and sister, so the design was fairly stylish. He wore a full black Kevlar suit with green streaks on some places. His hero costume included bracers on his wrists that provide a useful function for his void orbs, a diamond-shaped respirator, and a visor with a greenish tint. Dad and Nis-san really went all out on his costume. All his gadgets were very advanced, and maybe a tiny bit unfair to use against his classmates. But it's not like he could just not use his gear. They were custom made for him after all. After he was sure that everything was in place, Izuku joined All Might in ground beta. Looking good, young Izuku. Dave and Melissa must have had fun designing your costume. You look great, All Might greeted when he saw Izuku walking towards him. Thanks, Uncle Might. I told them that they shouldn't have made my costume this advanced from the get-go, but they insisted. He giggled and scratched his neck sheepishly. Midoriya, Izuku flinched. Not used to being called like that by his uncle. I think we should keep our familial bond under wraps. Other people might gossip about inaccurate things. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll call you All Might then. When the hero nodded, Izuku sighed in relief. He and Melissa had always addressed their uncle as Uncle Toshi when they were alone or in civilian form. If All Might was with them in his hero form, they'd call him Uncle Might. But it was logical to keep their relationship secret, since it could be used against either of them. After a while, his classmates arrived one by one, and all of them stared with awe at the confident presence that Izuku portrayed. The boy wasn't actually confident in any sense of the word. He simply froze up when he saw how cool his classmates were, which made him stand straighter than usual. When all of 1A was present, All Might began, "Everyone, this is your classmate, Izuku, what the fuck? Hi Kaken," Izuku waved sheepishly. He was not prepared when his friend tackled him, cussing him about how he was a liar and didn't say anything about going to UA. "I didn't lie, Kaken, I simply didn't tell you. Besides, you never asked what high school I'd go to," he countered when they stood up again. "Fucking whatever, just tell me next time, got it?" At Izuku's frantic nod, Kaken continued, "How's Uncle and Melissa back there?" Izuku was about to reply when his eyes caught the bewildered faces of his classmates. Kaken, class should get started. We'll catch up later, okay?" He whispered and smiled shyly at everyone. All Might cleared his throat. "As I was saying, this is your classmate, Izuku Midoriya. Hi everyone. I'm sorry I was absent yesterday, and if I'm ruining an established class dynamic, I look forward to working with all of you. Please forgive me." Izuku rambled and bowed. Cold sweat ran along his forehead. So much for first impressions. "It's totally okay, man. You must have really important business if Mr. Aizawa excused you," a redhead told him. "Yeah, you don't have to apologize." A brunette in a "Was that a spacesuit?" agreed. "All right then, let's begin our battle trial." All Might interrupted any reply Izuku could have given. After drawing lots, Izuku was partnered with Uraraka, the brunette with a spacesuit, and he doesn't know if he should be thankful that Kaken's team was their enemy. On one hand, at least he knew how one of his opponents fight. On the other hand, Kaken was very difficult to deal with during an official match with no boundaries. He was still thinking of a strategy when his classmates followed All Might to the observation room, while Izuku and Uraraka went to the site of their battle trial. "It's a pleasure to work with you, Uraraka-san." Izuku offered a smile and a handshake. "I'm excited to work with you too, Zuku." Uraraka smiled back. "Could I call you that, by the way? I heard that's what Bakugo called you, and it's so cute." "Sure. So, could I know your quirk, Uraraka-san?" "Mine is called Relocate. I could basically create these void orbs that I can use to create portals or forcibly teleport anything within a limited radius." "Well, you have a warp quirk. That's so cool." "My quirk is zero gravity. When I touch objects with the pads on my 5 fingertips, I could make them weightless. I have a 3-ton weight limit though," Uraraka informed. Izuku's eyes sparkled at the mention of another unique quirk. Zero gravity sounds so cool. It has so many uses for combat, rescue, and even support. Nis-san would love to work on a project regarding your quirk. I should really tell her, is that okay with you? Zuku, we should really concentrate on our match first. I haven't memorized the layout of the building yet," Uraraka giggled. Oh yeah, sorry about that. I actually memorized the layout, and I have a plan to dominate this match with the use of your quirk. The manic smile on Izuku's face made Uraraka nervous. Not for herself though. Their opponents wouldn't know what hit them. When the match started, 𝐬𝐸 used her quirk to lift herself and 𝐬𝐡𝐚 to the 3rd floor. 𝐀𝐦 would probably want the bomb at a higher floor, but since 𝐬𝐡𝐚 wasn't sure, the middle ground would be a safe bet. The hero pair traversed the building, waiting for 𝐀𝐦 to find them first. The building was eerily quiet as they made their way through it. It set 𝐬𝐡𝐚 on edge that he couldn't tell where 𝐀𝐦 would attack. Just to be safe, he created a void orb on his right hand and grasped 𝐬𝐸's wrist. When they turned a corner, 𝐬𝐡𝐚 managed to teleport both of them away from the explosion 𝐀𝐦 released. "Come and face me, Zuko. I've been waiting for an official match, and I will kick your ass this time." 𝐬𝐡𝐚 nodded at 𝐬𝐸, a signal that their plan is in motion. "You really think you can defeat me, 𝐀𝐦? Come at me then." When 𝐀𝐦 charged, 𝐬𝐡𝐚 grasped 𝐬𝐸 with his left hand and grasped a void orb on his right. They teleported to the spot where 𝐀𝐦 stood. "𝐬𝐸, now!" 𝐬𝐡𝐚 shouted and created a portal where his partner vanished. 𝐀𝐦 did a double take before he grinned. "That was bossy, Zuko. You want a one-on-one fight? Then I'll give it to you." The blonde dashed at him again, this time with explosions speeding him up. 𝐬𝐡𝐚 flipped and turned and teleported continuously to avoid his friend's assault. All of 𝐀𝐦's attacks never connected, but 𝐬𝐡𝐚 also didn't deliver blows. "Are you really sticking to your cowardly tactics, Zuko?" The blonde was panting by now, but his quirk would be more destructive because of accumulated sweat. "It's cold strategy, 𝐀𝐦." His friend growled and released an explosion at him. 𝐬𝐡𝐚 redirected the blast back at 𝐀𝐦 through a portal. When the blonde became disoriented by his own attack, 𝐬𝐡𝐚 teleported behind him and opened a portal that was only big enough to allow 𝐬𝐸's hand. His partner touched 𝐀𝐦 and was able to negate gravity for him, making the blonde float off the ground. "Huh, nice work, 𝐬𝐸," he exclaimed on his earpiece. Without the influence of gravity, 𝐬𝐡𝐚 made quick work of apprehending 𝐀𝐦 with the capture tape 𝐬𝐻𝐻 provided. The blonde squirmed, but he stayed still after the official announcement. Villain Katsuki Bakugo is captured. 𝐬𝐡𝐚 grinned at his friend. "I won again, 𝐀𝐦. TCH, I'll beat you next time. Now go win already so I can beat you up later," 𝐀𝐦 threatened playfully. 𝐬𝐡𝐚 nodded, and he vaguely heard the frantic screams of Ida from the other side of his friend's earpiece. He left 𝐀𝐦 and climbed upstairs where he activated his earpiece. "Phase 1 is complete, 𝐬𝐸. It's your turn." "Of course, Zuko." 𝐬𝐡𝐚 waited while 𝐬𝐸 prepared their Phase 2. Both of them wanted a perfect victory. It could be achieved by capturing both villains, while also getting the bomb. After a while, 𝐬𝐡�'s visor flickered and showed him the room where Ida and the bomb were located. The visor provided him visuals from a detachable high-definition camera. It helps 𝐬𝐡� see far places where he normally couldn't create portals. He gave the camera to 𝐬𝐸 so that he could provide her backup when needed, while also giving him the ability to teleport right where Ida was. 𝐬𝐡� concentrated his quirk on his right hand and threw it few steps ahead of him to create a portal. His quirk opened a doorway above Ida, and the spectacled boy was clearly startled. "Hello, Ida, greetings from the 3rd floor." Bah, the poor boy had been too distracted to spot 𝐬𝐸 coming close. By the time he realized it, he was already floating in the air. 𝐬𝐡� jumped down from his portal and captured Ida easily. Plus ultra. The hero pair shouted and high-fived. With matching grins, they both touched the bombs. The villain team is captured, and the bomb is secured. The hero team wins the match. 𝐬𝐡�'s hero costume disclaimer. This design is from the unreleased 3rd movie of MHA. I'm super uncreative, so this is how I view 𝐬𝐡�'s hero costume in this fic. Just add a visor on his eyes with a greenish tint, and that's it. Todoroki never thought that he'd meet that green-haired boy from my island again. The boy whom introduced himself as Zuko was a nervous wreck that rambled endlessly. It was seriously exhausting to deal with him. They weren't even supposed to talk, but the boy was quite insistent. When his father brought him to Island, Todoroki wasn't really planning on having fun. He was just exploring the attraction for the Expo when he came across an interesting training course. A green-haired boy was currently participating. He looked really fragile with a small stature. Todoroki was quite interested to see what his quirk could be. He didn't expect what he saw. The boy littered the field with portals and threw greenish energy balls inside it. One by one, the robots on the course vanished and reappeared 100 feet above the air. All the machines fell down from the sky, and not a single one of them survived. He completed the course within 15 seconds. Impressive, even for Todoroki's standards. That boy's quirk was interesting. He'd never seen anything like it. Todoroki wanted to see how it would match against a more combat-oriented quirk like his, so he signed up for the course. With sheer raw power from his right side, all the robots were annihilated by a giant glacier. His record was 14 seconds. Raw power beats utility, he thought. He was satisfied with the results, so he went on his way. However, his attempt to leave immediately was halted when the boy appeared in front of him with sparkling eyes. "That was so cool. Your power is probably the most powerful ice quirk I've ever seen in my life. Thanks. He wasn't really sure how to reply. Would you mind if I ask some questions about your quirk? The boy looked really interested, judging by how bright his eyes were. But Todoroki wasn't really in the mood to interact with strangers. Yes, I would mind, actually. I have somewhere to be. Of course, sorry for bothering you. The boy's smile fell, and he looked like a kicked puppy. Damn him. Now the guilt would eat Todoroki if you left him like this. So he solidified his resolve before replying. You know what? Whatever. Ask away. Really? Thank you so much. Okay, maybe the bright smile of the boy was worth the trouble. The green-haired teen introduced himself as Zuko. It was most probably his first name, so Todoroki also used Shoto. It's not like they would meet again, so calling each other by first name won't be that bad, right? Todoroki found out just how intelligent this Zuko was. He asked all the right questions, like why Todoroki's quirk only came out of his right side. He also heard Zuko whisper under his breath how he must have a dual quirk, which was spot on. The boy also thought of some moves Todoroki could use. He was more than happy to test the theories of Zuko, and they turned out great. Todoroki could create pieces of ice armor to enhance his attacks and protect himself. He could also fine-tune the ice he releases so that it would be slippery for his opponents. These moves would be used against his father when they sparred. What a great way to get back to his old man. After their little discussion, Zuko left to attend to his own business. Todoroki was finally alone, and he savored that moment way more than he should have. Because now, the nervous but highly observant boy is back as his classmate. He never imagined Zuko to be quite powerful in combat, and it looked like everyone else was just as shocked, if not even more so, than him. While the class was following All Might to the observation room, he heard the whispers of his classmates. So that was the student that the principal said was the most advanced out of all first years. He didn't look much, and he was short too, the pink girl said. Well, you couldn't deny that his costume looked really badass, and he commanded a presence with it. It was the blonde with a black streak on his hair this time. A presence of a nervous wreck maybe, the earphone girl said, which earned a few snickers. Guys, it's not manly to talk about him when he's not here. Kirishima's right. We shouldn't judge a classmate by how he looks or how nervous he was. Let his performance speak for him, Ieyasu told them. Pay attention, class. This is a good time to assess the combat ability of your classmates, All Might said as he prepared to start the battle. When the battle trial began, everyone was silent. Todoroki's classmates held their breaths as Bakugo came closer to where the hero pair were. When the blonde attacked, no one expected to see the heroes teleport away from the blast. He has a teleportation quirk. The guy with a tape quirk exclaimed. They all watched in anticipation and amazement as Zuko created a portal where his partner vanished. The green-haired boy was acrobatic and had impressive situational awareness. He wasn't hit by any of Bakugo's attacks, and he didn't look tired at all. Everyone cheered when Zuko redirected Bakugo's attack back at him. They didn't expect Uraraka's quirk to incapacitate both villains, and it was quick capture for Zuko from there. When the participants of the first battle returned, the class clapped for them. That match was so entertaining to watch. Congratulations, you guys. Your teleportation quirk is so cool, Midoriya. Those were some sick moves, man. The poor boy was so red on his face. Zuko must have really been tired with the match. He looked sick. Todoroki was about to ask him if he was okay, but All Might interrupted him. Okay, settle down everyone. Now's the time to analyze the battle. Who do you think was the MVP of the match? It was Ieyasu that raised her hand. The clear MVP was Midoriya. When the match was announced, I couldn't help but think that Uraraka's quirk wouldn't be really helpful in combat. Bakugo's blast would keep her away, while Ida was too fast for her to capture. Midoriya not only made Uraraka's quirk shine, but he was also able to apprehend both villains in the most efficient way. What? Really? I didn't die. Zuko tried to argue, but he was shushed by All Might. I agree with young Ieyasu. Midoriya is the MVP of the match. Now let's proceed to the next battle, Hero Fledglings. Izuku was still buzzing with excitement even as the day was over. The hero course was really fun, and he got to see his classmates' amazing quirks. Uraraka's quirk was very interesting, and so was Ieyasu's. He couldn't wait to ask questions about them. And of course, Shoto-kun was as impressive as he remembered. Although they didn't talk, Izuku caught the slight nod Shoto-kun gave him when they locked eyes. He smiled back despite the butterflies in his stomach. When the day ended, Kaken invited Izuku for a family dinner at their house. His exact words were, I told the old hag that you're my classmate now, so she wants to have dinner. You better not chicken out, Zuko. She's not making our food spicy tonight because of your weak ass. Izuku was more than happy to accept. After all, Auntie Mitsuki's katsudon was the closest to what his mother used to make. Uncle Toshi already gave his permission, and allowed Izuku to go with Kaken. The only catch was that he returned before his curfew, which was 10 p.m. His uncle wouldn't be able to fetch him since his All Might form already ran out. So, Izuku would simply open a portal to return to their condo. The sun had already set when they arrived at the Bakugo household, and the moment Izuku passed through the doors, he was met by a crushing hug from Auntie Mitsuki. "Izuku, I missed you so much." "Missed you too, Auntie," he said with his cheeks squished. 𝐻𝐾𝐦's home always had this welcoming atmosphere, even though 2 of its inhabitants are hot-headed explosives. Geez, old hag, let Zuko breathe. He would have already teleported if he wasn't so polite. "Oh, shut up, Katsuki," his auntie said, but let Izuku go nonetheless. The mother and son duo lead him to the dining room where the delicious smell of food was coming from. At the sight of his uncle, Izuku beamed and offered a hug. "It's been so long, Uncle Masaru. It's good to see you again, kiddo. Now come on, tell us how your first day on UA went," his uncle said as they all sat down to eat. "I loved it. Everyone was so nice, and the battle training was really fun," Izuku exclaimed. He could still remember every moment of the battle trial, and it makes him happy to know that these exhilarating exercises would happen again. 𝐻𝐾𝐦 grumbled something under his breath, which made Izuku grin. "In fact, during the training, I totally beat 𝐻𝐾𝐦." He laughed maniacally. "You did not." The adults smiled fondly at their bickering. Before their friendly teasing turned into something more serious, Masaru spoke up. "So, Izuku, where do you stay right now?" "Oh, I stay with Uncle Might. He's my official caretaker during my time here in Japan," Izuku replied, still smiling. "That's good then. There's nowhere safer than under the care of the #1 hero," his aunt said in approval. "How's David and Melissa doing?" "They're quite busy right now since it's the beginning of the school year, but I was still able to call them when 𝐻𝐾𝐦 and I were riding the train. Make sure to tell them not to overdo it. If they don't listen, your mother's anniversary is already next month, so I'll reprimand them myself," Auntie Mitsuki declared. Izuku giggled at his aunt's animosity. "I'll warn them, Auntie." They ate without interruption after that. Small talk and funny stories were exchanged among the 4. And as always, Izuku was the last one to finish his food. He really had no idea how people could eat so fast like it was their last meal. Izuku helped wash the dishes after dinner, even at the insistence of everyone. 𝐻𝐾𝐦 looked considerably upset since he wanted to beat Izuku at video games if he couldn't do so in real life. The green-haired teen finished the dishes quickly. He wanted to show 𝐻𝐾𝐦 how frustrating it was to continuously lose to his sister in video games. Izuku learned everything from Melissa. She was so good in strategy games, racing games, and puzzles. But 𝐻𝐾𝐦 decided they would play a shooting game, which Izuku was horrible at. It was already 9:30 when they finished, and 𝐻𝐾𝐦 was visibly dozing off. His friend had a sleep schedule that he messed up tonight. He felt slightly guilty, but brushed it off when he remembered how vicious 𝐻𝐾𝐦 was when he teased him about being bad at shooting games. Izuku felt like he imposed with the Bakugas long enough, so he called Toshinori and waited for his uncle to pick up the phone. He knew that Uncle Toshi still needed to transform into his All Might form to avoid complications, even just for a short while. When the video call connected, Izuku and his uncle said their farewell to the Bakugas. Uncle Toshi then faced his camera to an empty space at their condo, where Izuku manifested a portal. When he closed his portal, Uncle Toshi transformed with a puff of smoke and had a fond smile on his face. "Had fun there, young Izuku." "I did, Uncle Toshi. There's never a dull moment with 𝐻𝐾𝐦 after all. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now go change into your pajamas and go to sleep. You had a long day," his uncle said, rubbing his hair. Toshinori disappeared into his own room after that, and Izuku also went to bed. The following day, he and Uncle Toshi left their condo earlier since his uncle needed to arrange some appointments. Izuku was unsurprised to see that Ada was the first one to arrive shortly after him. "Ah, good morning, Midoriya. You really are a far superior student than I owe." "Good morning, Ada. I don't see how I'm superior to you. I think we're fairly equal," he said nervously. Izuku doesn't really do well when praised. "But you are. According to Mr. Aizawa, the principal deduced that you are the most advanced among us first years. I must say, I was doubtful before meeting you. But after yesterday's match, and your punctuality today, I completely agree with the principal," Ida said with his robotic mannerisms. Izuku should put that on his notebook. What? They said that. Boo. At that moment, several voices entered the room, and stopped when they saw Izuku. "Oh hey, it's Midoriya. Good morning, man." The redhead greeted with his sharp-toothed grin. "Of course you two are the earliest in class. Such hard-working students." The pink-haired girl sighed dramatically and fell on the blonde with a lightning bolt on his hair. "Hey you guys, I haven't introduced myself yet." "Denki Kaminari at your service," the blonde smiled. "I'm Ijiro Kirishima. And this is Mina Ashido." Izuku smiled at the 3. "It's so nice to meet you guys. I'm Izuku Midoriya, but you already know that," he laughed. Ashido squealed. "You are so precious." She lifted Izuku from his waist and twirled him around. "Ashido, calm yourself and put down Midoriya." Ada scolded with his robot arms. In the background, the 2 other boys just laughed, secretly happy that they landed in Class 1A. When class started, Izuku was mostly silent. only participating in class when he was actually called. Lunchtime came unnoticed for the green-haired boy, but now he was faced with another dilemma. Who should he sit with? He didn't have to worry about this yesterday because Mr. Aizawa took him for his quirk apprehension test. Maybe he could ask his teacher to allow him in the teacher's lounge. It's too embarrassing though. Uncle Toshi was a no-go because of a call he needed to make, so that leaves him with his classmates. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 was the most obvious option, but what if he already made friends and they wouldn't like Izuku? Ashido, Kaminari, and Kirishima were really friendly earlier, but he was too shy to ask them. Tagada-senpai also invited him to sit together for lunch, but it might be weird if he sat with a senior student. He really didn't think this through. The cafeteria was already filling up, and he was standing with his tray like an idiot finding where to sit. Thankfully, that decision was made for him by strong hands guiding him on an empty table. He was fairly certain that the person was Shoto-kun, and when he looked back, he was proved right. Izuku could practically feel the blush on his face and the butterflies in his stomach even as they sat down. It was awkward. Izuku just stared at his food, while Shoto gave his thanks and began eating. "Are you not going to eat?" the taller boy asked. Yeah, of course, Shoto-kun. See, could I still call you that?" he asked with a small shy voice. "Zuku wasn't even your name at all. Did you not trust me enough when we met?" Izuku could have sworn he saw a hint of sadness in Shoto's heterochromic eyes. "Oh, of course I trust you. Back then I told you to call me Zuku because that's what my friends call me. I'm sorry if it seemed like I was too distrustful of you. I understand if you don't want to be friends anymore. Shut up, Zuku, and sit down." 𝐻𝐻𝐿's voice manifested out of nowhere and pushed him down his seat. "I still want to keep calling you Zuku, and you can call me Shoto. I'm not really bothered." 𝐻𝐻𝐿's brows twitched and the smell of nitroglycerin filled Izuku's nose. "Since when did you and half knew each other, Zuku?" It's a long story," Izuku replied hesitantly. "What's half and half?" Shoto asked, confused. And oh my gosh, he looked so cute when confused. Izuku's breathing stopped for a moment, and his failure to reply alerted Shoto that something must be wrong. "Zuku, is something wrong?" "Don't call him that, you bastard. I'm the only one allowed to call him that," 𝐻𝐻𝐿 growled menacingly, although the dual-haired boy didn't look bothered at all. "My sister calls me Zuku, 𝐻𝐻𝐿, and you're Raka too, so don't take it out on Shoto-kun." His friend had the decency to look somewhat sorry, and that's enough for Izuku. "And half is just 𝐻𝐻𝐿's terrible nickname for you. Don't mind him," he addressed Shoto. "Oh, I see. But are you okay though? You looked really out of it just a while ago," Shoto asked, still concerned, and put his hand on Izuku's forehead. "Your face is burning up. I could cool you down if you like." That was not the right thing to say at all, because now Izuku's face is even redder. To think that Shoto was so concerned of his well-being, he just couldn't handle it. "Bathroom. I go to, need some air, see you later." Izuku rambled incoherent words. He hoped that the idea was grasped by the two. Izuku immediately went for the sink and washed his face. He had an entire year to compose himself over his crush on Shoto, but one conversation was all it took to make him as red as a tomato. That handsome boy needed to tone down his charm. Otherwise, Izuku would unknowingly smile all the time like a lovesick idiot. He didn't return to the cafeteria after that. Luckily, he brought a sandwich with him. This sustenance should let him last until the end of the day since they won't have any hero training. It wasn't until later that he found out his puny sandwich would never be enough. Uncle Toshi took him to a place he never knew he needed to see, the Night-Eye Agency. "We need to tell you about One for All." Oh, how Izuku wished he had eaten lunch. His empty stomach was so not ready for this. Toshinori never got over how Izuku was unaffected by One for All. While he and Tagada stayed on Island, Toshinori grasped every opportunity to make the boys spar. His successor and nephew exchanged wins and losses, yet every time, Tagada reported that One for All still didn't work on Izuku. He waited until they returned to Japan before pursuing further answers. After all, his calls to his associates could be traced and recorded with the correct tools. So, when Izuku and Tagada had finally settled, Toshinori requested a meeting with Night-Eye. He knows that his friend is busy with his agency, but the matter at hand shouldn't be left in the dark. "So you're telling me that this Midoriya boy is somehow unaffected by One for All?" Night-Eye inquired with his eyebrows raised. "His power is a warp quirk. It doesn't make sense that he is immune to your power." They were currently seated in Night-Eye's office, with the room sealed off so that information doesn't go to the wrong hands. Toshinori's tea had been cold for quite some time, while Night-Eye continuously refilled his cup. "I know what it sounds like, Night-Eye, but Mirio and I already conducted experiments in Island. One for All shuts down when used on Izuku." Night-Eye pondered for a moment. "The only way we could pursue more answers is if we delve deeper into Midoriya's quirk, and it would make sense that we also tell him about One for All." Toshinori coughed blood at the preposition. "That would put Izuku on danger. He will be an invaluable ally for Mirio, All Might. Think about it, neither of us will live forever. When we pass away, Mirio will need allies of his own. Midoriya will be an asset to him. His warp quirk could change the tides of battle. And you have already established trust with each other. I suppose you're right, he sighed. 𝐬𝐬 would indeed need allies of his own. And 𝐬𝐻𝐸 might be the perfect start. The boy was loyal and had a good moral compass. Besides, 𝐸𝐻𝐸 watched him grew up as one of the most important people in 𝐸. Yet 𝐬𝐻𝐸 still remained humble. Of course I'm right. 𝐬𝐬 and Midoriya are already on their way here. All we have to do is wait. 𝐸𝐻𝐸 hummed in response. He had suggested that 𝐬𝐻𝐸 simply open a portal to the agency, but it might seem like they're taking advantage of his quirk too much. After a while, there was a knock on the door, and he stood up to open it. 𝐬𝐬 had a bright smile on his face, and beside him was a shy 𝐬𝐻𝐸 that seemed to be hiding from scrutiny. His successor was akin to an older sibling bringing his younger brother to an unfamiliar place. It looked really cute. Let's go, Midoriya-kun. 𝐬𝐬 beamed. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 didn't acknowledge the invite, since he looked like he was having a fanboy panic, which was probably accurate. 𝐸𝐻𝐸 knew the boy was a big fan of heroes, and it was only now that he realized 𝐬𝐻𝐸's never been to any hero agency. This is so cool. And as Sir Gnidai, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. The boy bowed deeply in an attempt to hide his flushed face. There was the slightest hint of amusement in Gnidai's face when he stood up. The pleasure is all mine, Midoriya. It's also good to finally see you in person. When All Might told me about your quirk, I was very interested to see it for myself. I'd be happy to show you, sir. But is that really why I'm here? Tagada-senpai didn't tell me. 𝐸𝐻𝐸 sighed, knowing he would be the one to explain everything. No, 𝐬𝐻𝐸. We called you here for a totally different purpose, he said and led the two boys inside. They sat on a couch across the adults, with a table separating them. Gnidai poured 2 cups of tea for the boys and refilled his own. 𝐸𝐻𝐸's cold tea was still untouched. When everyone was settled, he started the conversation. We need to tell you about One for All. 𝐬𝐻𝐸's eyes brightened at this, but 𝐸𝐻𝐸 didn't know why. Oh, you mean the concept of one for all and all for one. Alexander Dumas really captured the essence of teamwork with his words. I am a firm believer of th. Young 𝐬𝐻𝐸, slow down. What are you talking about? Beside him, Gnidai chuckled lightly. I think he's talking about that pre-Quirk French novel, The Three Musketeers. Am I right, Midoriya? Are we not talking about that? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 looked down bashfully. Perhaps you should listen to what 𝐸𝐻𝐸-san has to say first. Midoriya-kun, Mirio said with a smile. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 always knew something was up with Uncle Toshi and Tagada-senpai, but he didn't expect that his uncle had passed down the most powerful quirk he knew to another generation, namely Tagada-senpai. How cool is that? From the information they gave him, One for All would most likely be even more powerful than the one his uncle wielded. He shifted excitedly on the couch and looked beside him where Tagada-senpai was smiling. 8 generations of harnessed raw power. No one would survive the total force of its full power. That is so cool, Tagada-san. Did you tell me so that when we spar, I could expect a fatal blow? In theory, that would have been the case. No human should be able to withstand the full might of One for All. Yet somehow, that doesn't apply to you, Midoriya, Gnidai said in a low tone. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 almost spat put the tea he was drinking. What? What are you talking about? Exactly that, 𝐬𝐻𝐸. 𝐸𝐻𝐸 sighed for the umpteenth time. There's no easy way to say this, but during our stay in 𝐸, Mirio and I have been conducting experiments regarding you. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 looked confused at that. What experiments did they mean? He was never aware of anything. Suddenly, he felt the urge to just teleport away. In his palm, small streaks of green energy are gathering to be a void orb. Stressful situations tend to trigger his quirk. Before anything happened, he calmed his racing heart and simply asked, what experiments, Uncle Toshi? His uncle looked dejected, while Tagada-senpai and Sir Gnidai looked away from him. Remember those sparring matches I arranged between you and Mirio? Every time I asked you to block Mirio's hits, he used One for All. But the power always disappears when it hits you. The power just disappears. That doesn't make any sense. The scientists of 𝐸 already studied his quirk extensively, so it couldn't be because of relocate. Are you sure? How is that even possible? We have no idea why this happens, which is exactly why we told you, Midoriya. Experiments should be done in order to decipher this mystery. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 thought for a moment. What if there are other people that are immune to One for All? He couldn't be the only one, surely. So, figuring out the cause of his immunity would help Tagada-senpai in the future. It made him shudder thinking of powerful villains unaffected by the most powerful quirk he'd seen. I'll help solve this mystery. If One for All has an exploitable weakness, then we must work hard to counter that. Gnidai hummed in satisfaction and stood up to shake 𝐬𝐻𝐸's hand. I'm glad that we're all on the same page. It might have been 𝐬𝐻𝐸's imagination, but he was certain that Sir Gnidai's eyes glowed when he looked at them directly. His uncle and Tagada-senpai also thanked him for his understanding, but he wasn't focused on that. He stared at Gnidai curiously, trying to read the hero. The man had a look of absolute horror on his face, and 𝐬𝐻𝐸 doesn't know why. Uncle Toshi led him to the door, but he was still looking at Gnidai. Just before his uncle could open the door, the spectacled piped up. Actually, I still have a matter to discuss with All Might. Mirio, why don't you drop off Midoriya before going home? Of course, sir. 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai beamed happily and put his arm around Izuku's shoulder. Let's head home, Midoriya-kun. Izuku just nodded dumbly and let the older boy take the lead. They walked in a slow pace and didn't bother on small talk. He was still overthinking about why 𝗀𝗏𝐸 looked frantic. From what he knew, the hero was laid back and always knew what to expect from situations because of his foresight. Wait, that's it. 𝗀𝗏𝐸 used foresight on him. But what did he saw that made him scared? Did he saw Izuku's death? Or perhaps a future where he turned against heroes, but he'd never do that. Maybe he would accidentally level cities with his quirk. That happened to a laboratory once. Or what if he was immune to 𝗀𝗏𝐸's quirk again? There was no way that happened, right? He's not that special. Midoriya-kun, you need to get out of your head. You might accidentally level the building. 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai chuckled and pointed at the green swirls of energy surrounding Izuku. What? When Izuku looked at himself, he really was literally glowing with anxiety. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt the energy around him dissipate. Funny thing, I was just actually thinking about that, 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai. You were thinking of leveling the building. 𝗃𝐻𝐸 looked shocked at that. Izuku laughed softly at the confusion. Nothing like that at all. I'm just overthinking stuff. I figured. But how are you taking in the information about? You know, I'm still processing it. It was so cool and sort of poetic in a way. But then you all told me that somehow it doesn't work on me. I'm just really anxious to find out why. 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai hummed thoughtfully. He opened the exit door of the agency. And when both of them were outside with the evening breeze, he continued the conversation. Whatever the reason, I think it's pretty cool that you aren't hurt by one for all. Izuku smiled at 𝗃𝐻𝐸. His senpai really cared for him. It was hard not to view the older boy as his older brother. He would never say it though. It's too embarrassing to admit out loud. Although, it's a real bummer that my quirks don't work on you, 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai sighed ruefully. The only reply he offered was an amused chuckle. It was a peaceful walk towards the station, but there was something missing. Oh, that's right. He hadn't eaten anything since lunch, save for that small sandwich he brought to school. Izuku could really feel the strain in his empty stomach. Looking around the block, he spotted a familiar store. 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai. What time does your train leave? Let's see, he dragged on, and looked at his phone. My train arrives in 30 minutes. Why do you ask? Mine arrives in 25 minutes. I was hoping to buy something to eat first, he said sheepishly. I don't mind. I want to munch on something too. Do you have anything in mind? At the question, Izuku pointed at an ice cream store across the street. The outer design looked really cute. It had a sign saying Dairy Dewdrops with a blue bunny holding a strawberry ice cream cone. It's where my mom used to take me for ice cream, and where we eat dessert during her anniversary, Izuku informed with a sad smile. Well, to be honest with you, I've never been to that ice cream store, but I think it's pretty great that they managed to stay in business throughout the years. I want to try their ice cream. Let's go. 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai pumped his fist in the air. Izuku smiled at the enthusiasm of 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai, so he led the way and opened the glass doors for them. He was immediately greeted by the pastel color scheme of the walls and the sweet aroma of ice cream. No one else was around, considering that the store would be closing within 10 minutes. Behind the counter was a familiar boy who had a confused look on his worn-out face. Midoriya, I didn't know you go to UA, the boy said. Noticing Izuku's uniform, I do. Shinsu-kun, I'm in class 1A. And this is 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai, a third year, Izuku said cheerily. He walked closer to the counter where several flavors were displayed, and 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai followed closely. Hello there, 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai waved his arm. Shinsu-kun hummed an acknowledgement at the blonde and turned to Izuku. Well, congratulations on passing Midoriya. I'm in 1 degree Celsius since I failed the entrance exam for the hero course. He sighed with a sad expression. I'm so sore, so, what do you guys want tonight? I assume it's the usual for Midoriya. And how about you, senpai? Izuku's eyes softened with sadness. He knew Shinsu's quirk was a sensitive topic, so he let his friend divert the subject. I'll have a cone of the s'mores ice cream, please, 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai supplied. Coming right up, please wait a moment. Shinsu doesn't usually act like this. He knew that his friend was happy for him, but there was also a hint of envy when he congratulated Izuku. His friend needed to be reminded of how special he is, and Izuku would be more than happy to do it. Strawberry ice cream bar for Midoriya, and s'mores ice cream cone for senpai. Shinsu handed them the food with a shallow smile. Thank you, 𝗃𝐻𝐸-senpai beamed. You've always liked strawberry, don't you, Midoriya-kun? Strawberry is my favorite flavor. He smiled, but when he saw the solemn eyes of Shinsu, his resolve strengthened. Actually, Shinsu-kun and I need to talk about a training regimen we agreed on. What? Shinsu asked, confused. Are you sure, Midoriya-kun? 𝗀𝗏𝐸 trusted me to at least drop you off at the train station. I'll be okay. I could just teleport to the condo afterwards. Okay then, if you insist. It was nice to meet you, Shinsu-kun. Thanks for the ice cream, 𝗳𝗏𝗧 said as he exited the store. Shinsu waited until he was sure the blonde was out of earshot before he turned at his friend. What are you talking about, Midoriya? We never agreed on anything. I didn't even know you're staying in Japan. Izuku nodded and took a bite off his ice cream bar before replying. Yeah, sorry about that. I wanted it to be a surprise or something. But enough about me. I've always thought it was unfair that the exam for heroics is prejudiced on physical quirks. Shinsu sighed and looked away from him. It's not your fault, Midoriya. The world has always been unfair, but it doesn't have to be. There's another way of entering Way of the Hero course, and I want to help you succeed in it, Izuku said as he waved his ice cream bar like a pointer stick during a presentation. I'm aware of that. The sports festival will be my saving grace, especially if I win it. Izuku pouted at Shinsu's lack of excitement. He was offering help, and it was also an excuse to hang out. Without any hesitance, he unceremoniously tossed a void orb at Shinsu and transported him in front of the counter. He ignored the startled sound his friend made. I'm going to send you a message within this week, containing the schedule of our training sessions. Why do you insist, Midoriya? I know you have better things to do. He rolled his eyes and pulled down Shinsu to one of the tables. After he sat down on the opposite chair, he continued, I know how much you want to be a hero, but you can't achieve it alone. You should learn basic hand-to-hand combat so that you can still fight without the use of your quirk. I want to help you because you're my friend, and maybe also hang out with you. Is that so wrong? Shinsu was blushing deeply, probably from embarrassment. Okay then, thank you for helping me, Midoriya, he smiled softly. Izuku hummed in content, and took another bite off his ice cream. Your strawberry ice cream bar is so good. Thank you for existing, Shinsu-kun. While Izuku was having a good time eating ice cream, the two adults left in the Night-Eye agency had to process another discovery regarding the boy. What do you mean young Izuku has no future? Night-Eye sighed. I never said he didn't have a future per se. What I meant was I couldn't see him in his own future. Toshinori was surprised when Night-Eye told him they still have something to talk about, but he didn't expect that it would be this complicated. Please explain what you mean, Night-Eye. When I used foresight on Midoriya, I was expecting to see him compete in the sports festival, get his provisional license, or maybe us figuring out why he's immune to one for all. He paused, catching his breath. But instead, I saw the cosmos, comets orbiting stars, meteors crashing down planets, and galaxies colliding. No matter how far I skip, there was no end to the vision of the universe. Is that really the vision you saw through foresight? Toshinori doesn't know what to think. A vision of someone's future, where the someone wasn't present. How was that even possible? Night-Eye massaged his temples before replying. Not only that, but the vision is endless. No end to the vision. But that means, yes, I don't know how or why, but this is my conclusion. Somehow, Izuku Midoriya is eternal. When Uncle Toshi arrived at the apartment, he looked worn out with his normally sunken eyes appearing even duller. He tried to ask what he discussed with Night-Eye, but his uncle dismissed him and said he needed rest. Izuku must have been right on the mark. Foresight was used on him. He tried not to overthink about the future Night-Eye saw. He really did. But the dark bags beneath his eyes were a testament to his failure. Uncle Toshi asked him about it, but he didn't want to bother his uncle when he also obviously hadn't slept. The car drive to UA was silent, both of them too tired to actually start a conversation. It was 7:30 a.m. when they arrived at the school. They walked their separate ways as Izuku went to the 1A classroom, while his uncle went to the teacher's lounge. He wasn't really paying attention as he strolled through the campus. His neglect led to him tripping down the staircase. Luckily, his reaction time wasn't dulled by lack of sleep, and he was able to teleport to safe ground. Except, it wasn't safe ground. He transported himself atop someone, and fell down like a sack of potatoes. His victim groaned, and it took Izuku 2 seconds to stand up stiffly. When he recognized the boy, his eyes widened. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Ida. I was so clumsy, I didn't see you there. Do you need to go to recovery, girl? I could teleport you there, Midoriya. I'm quite alright, Ida interrupted and placed his hands on Izuku's shoulders. You're overreacting over an accident to the point where you're shaking. We're heroes in training. Injuries like these should not faze us. So you are injured. I'm really sorry, Ida. Ida smiled. It's just a slight ache on my left arm. It'll go away in a while. No need to worry. Izuku whimpered with watery eyes. He really didn't mean to hurt Ida. I still feel bad though. His classmate sent another reassuring smile at him, so he tried to calm his guilt as well. To make up for my mistake, allow me to do this, Izuku said and tossed a void orb in front of them. It opened a portal to the door of 1A. Wow, I must say, this will be the first time I'll be experiencing a warp quirk, Ida mused. His classmate looked really stiff and calculative as he stepped through the portal. When both of them reached the other side, he looked at Ida to see his reaction. That was relatively normal, I guess. Izuku chuckled lightly. I'll make sure to make it interesting next time, Ida. The spectacled boy opened the door in lieu of a response, and they were greeted by a grinning Katsuki Bakugo. Huh, I beat you, Zuko. Beat me in what, Kaken? He asked as he settled down his chair behind the blonde. I arrived before you and Four Eyes did, Kaken boasted. So what? If I knew we were competing, I could have teleported myself here an hour ago. Kaken looked taken aback by his confidence, but the shock was completely replaced by an angry snarl. Zuko, you little cheeky basta, good morning everyone. A new voice piped up, cutting off Kaken. Shut up, Ponytail. Good morning to you too, Yaoyorozu, Izuku waved happily. He had memorized the names of all his classmates, and already had interactions with most of them. He was happy to know that everyone in Class 1A was friendly. You two are as punctual as ever, the black-haired girl said, pointing at Ida and Izuku. But I've always seen you arrive 30 minutes before class, not an hour. I arrive when I want to. Ponytail, Kaken growled when addressed by the girl. Yaoyorozu just shrugged at the blonde's animosity and sat down on her seat. Izuku had to suppress a giggle at her nonchalance. Kaken might seem angry all the time, but he doesn't really act on his rage. Izuku had always found it funny every time Kaken held himself back against people that don't deserve verbal insults. Did any of you guys encounter any difficulty entering the school with all those reporters? Ada inquired, and sat beside Izuku. Reporters, ch. Your privileged ass wouldn't know, Zuko. You enter from another gate riding a car. There was a fucking mob of reporters on the main entrance, hogging any information they could find about All Might. It was a fucking mess. Ada hummed in agreement. Yes, it was indeed a mess. Although, I would have preferred if you didn't use profanity in describing it, Bakugo. The blonde ignored Ida's comment. So that's why my driver said that we'll enter from another gate. I wasn't really paying attention since I was reading a book, Yaoyorozu added. From across the room, there was a dramatic crash of the door. The four students all stood up, thinking it was a threat, but they were greeted by a panting Kaminari. The front gate was brutal, he said in between breaths. The blonde had his hair sticking random directions, and he was covered in sweat. What happened, Kaminari? You look like someone who just ran a marathon, Izuku said with a tilt of his head. The blonde held up his finger, signaling that he needed a moment. Yaoyorozu had a concerned look on her face. Ida was panicking on how messy he looked even though class hasn't started yet, and Kaken just grumbled disapprovingly. When Kaminari calmed his breathing, he sat down on his seat in an exaggerated plop. There were so many reporters, they didn't let me pass. I was down for a small interview, but then this journalist with an electric quirk suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It totally startled me, dude. Kaminari, did you accidentally electrocute the reporters? Ida asked in a panicked tone. The other three students also looked horrified from what Kaminari was implying. What? No way, man. Our quirks reacted, but not violently. All it did was make everyone's hair messy, like mine. Everyone sighed in relief. It would have been bad if a hero in training harmed civilians. Why did you run away then? It was Yaoyorozu that voiced Izuku's question. If he didn't do anything wrong, what prompted Kaminari to dash away like he was being chased by a killer? The blonde shivered. When I was apologizing for my quirk discharge, I spotted a very creepy guy with a sadistic smile. He was hiding behind a tree, but he was definitely stalking students. It was so weird. Huh, you're such an idiot, dunce face. Running away like that because of a creep. Grow up. That's mean, Kaken. Izuku smacked Kaken lightly, earning him a glare. Sorry about him. He's just grumpy because of what I said earlier. So, do you think the teachers would drive away those reporters? I'm kinda worried for our schoolmates that don't do well with crowds, Yaoyorozu said worriedly. I sure hope they do. UA is a prestigious school, and its faculty should strive for an environment where the students are safe and comfortable. Wouldn't you agree, Yaoyorozu? The raven-haired girl nodded. Speaking of comfortable students, Midoriya, you look like you haven't slept at all. I had a lot in my mind last night. Izuku laughed nervously. Kaken eyed him. What did you overthink this time, you nerd? Izuku didn't really want to lie. He needed a distraction to divert the attention from him. Anything would do. So, when he spotted Shoto entering the classroom, he didn't hesitate to change the subject. Shoto-kun, good morning. He waved enthusiastically. Did the reporters outside give you any trouble? Everyone stared at the boy in question. Not really. I just walked in casually after Kaminari caused a commotion. Everyone was too busy fixing their hair and equipment to notice me. You were there, so you must have seen that creepy man, right? The one hiding behind a tree. Shoto sat down his chair and thought for a moment before replying. I didn't see anyone besides the reporters and other students. You must be seeing things, dunce face. Hey, I totally saw him, man. Izuku smiled fondly at his classmates. This is an environment he could get used to. But even though he wanted to participate with their bickering, his lack of sleep was catching up to him. With a yawn, he took a nap on his desk. Hopefully he could wake up before the bell. Todoroki watched his green-haired friend softly. Zuko was still asleep on his desk, his messy hair brushed up to reveal a calm, sleepy face. Their classmates had all taken turns on getting a picture of the greenette. He admitted that he too had his own copy, which Uraraka took for him. It was only a few minutes before class starts, but their teacher still hasn't arrived. The room was buzzing with conversation, and each person was doing a different thing. Luckily, even with all the noise, Zuko still napped soundly. "Hey, Zuko, wake up. Class will start soon." 𝗵𝘃𝐸 lightly shook him. The green-haired boy didn't look fazed at all. "Hey, wake up. 5 more minutes, Ni-san." Everyone fell silent at Zuko's mumble. He adjusted his arm a bit and folded into himself even more. The boy looked really comfortable. Todoroki almost felt bad when 𝗵𝘃𝐸 insisted on waking him. "Hey nerd, I'm not your fucking sister. Wake up already." It was on that moment that a loud crashing sound resounded, along with an awfully noisy alarm. His classmates covered their ears, but he wasn't that bothered. The one who was bothered the most, however, was definitely Zuko. He abruptly stood up, eliciting a surprised yell from 𝗫𝗀. His posture was ready for battle, and green swirls of energy surrounded him. "Where's the threat?" Zuko asked in a serious tone. No one expected that. Class 1A blinked in confusion at how suddenly he switched from sleepy to combat ready. Zuko looked at the room and read everyone's expressions. He must have mistaken their shocked faces as a sign of trouble. "Geez, calm down, nerd. It was a fucking alarm, probably because of those reporters." Zuko's stance faltered. "So, there's no trouble?" "No, dude. So make those green stuff disappear." Kaminari gestured all around Zuko. He looked confused at first, but then he noticed the energy surrounding him. Oh, right, sorry about that." He rubbed his neck sheepishly. With a gesture of his hand, Zuko made his quirk fade away. "Sorry for startling you, 𝗫𝗀𝗧." "Nah, it's fine. But where's your chair?" "It totally disappeared when you stood up," the grapehead said. Zuko turned around to see that his chair was in fact gone. Todoroki also saw his friend's quirk envelop the seat. He was quite curious where the thing ended up teleporting to. "Oh my gosh, I don't know where those things go." "What do you mean by those things, Midoriya?" Zero asked beside the teen. 𝗵𝘃𝐸 chuckled. "The fucker's quirk has a mind of its own when he can't control his emotions. For all he knows, the stuff that disappeared might have ended in a fucking volcano." "For a nerd, you really are clueless, aren't you, Zuko?" The greenette pouted and mumbled incoherent words. "What was that, nerd?" I said. "Mr. Aizawa, please give Kakin detention for being mean," Zuko repeated clearly, with a wide grin. Todoroki looked at the doorway where Zuko's eyes were glued. Sure enough, their homeroom teacher was there, albeit still inside a sleeping bag and lying on the floor. He was looking at the students with an amused grin. "𝗵𝘃𝐸, that's detention." "What?" Mr. Aizawa ignored the blonde and unzipped his sleeping bag. When he settled in front of the class, his glowing red eyes settled on 𝗵𝘃𝐸, who was busy muttering curses about unfairness. "That was a joke, 𝗵𝘃𝐸. Apologies if you didn't get it." The class lightly chuckled at that, which made the explosive a blushing mess. "Midoriya, how did you lose your chair?" "Actually, I'm not even gonna bother. Just go ask Cementos where you could get another one. Don't take more time than necessary." Todoroki watched as Zuko left the room hurriedly. He figured the boy would simply teleport back when he already had the chair. Mr. Aizawa started roll call, and Zuko returned not long after. Kaminari, 𝗫𝗀𝗧, and Zero let out a girly shriek when a portal suddenly opened on Zuko's spot. Oh, sorry about that, you guys." He chuckled nervously and stepped through the portal while carrying his chair. Their teacher looked unamused. Mr. Aizawa decided not to say anything as he waited for Zuko to settle down. "Now that everyone's here, you have an important task ahead of you." He paused dramatically. "It's time for you to decide on a class representative." Immediately, everyone in the room started to volunteer for the job. Todoroki really found it noisy and annoying. The only people who weren't shouting about being class rep was him, Zuko, Tokoyami, and a few others. Finally, they were silenced by Ida, who suggested they vote who everyone thinks is the most suitable. Todoroki knew it would be a great opportunity and training if he were to become class rep, but he really didn't want the extra work, and he's not interested in taking the lead. He prefers to work alone after all. Looking at his classmates, there are 2 candidates which he thinks would be the most suitable for the position. Yaoyorozu showcased her excellent observational skills during the battle trial, and she was also quite intelligent. She ranked first on the quirk apprehension test, and her complicated quirk makes her decisive for every situation. But even then, Todoroki doesn't know her personally. Not like Zuko, at least. The greenette was intelligent and had commendable analytical skills. He was also very passionate with what he does, and even managed to draw out the potential of 2 quirks he just knew about. Todoroki learned new ways to attack with his ice because of Zuko, and the boy also made zero gravity shine during the battle training. A leader should be able to bring out the best in his subjects, so he voted for Zuko. While the votes were being tallied by Ada and Isui, Todoroki spied on Zuko, who looked like he was about to collapse. His friend tried to suppress a yawn and curled on his seat, probably to take a light nap. He smiled. Zuko acted like a cat because of exhaustion. It wasn't long before the results were written down. Looking at the board, he was surprised to see he had one vote. Who voted for him anyway? Well, it's not like there would be any difference if he knew. He was unsurprised to see that the Greenette received the most votes. Out of everyone in 1A, Zuko was the one that left a lasting impression. Midoriya, Yaoyorozu, please come to the front, Mr. Aizawa grumbled as he stood up from his sleeping bag. The black-haired girl arrived at the front first and waited for Zuko, but the boy in question didn't even know he was called. Everyone blinked at the napping boy, and it was Mineta that woke him up. Hey Midoriya, Mr. Aizawa's calling you, he said and lightly shook Zuko's shoulders. The boy stood up startled. Oh, what? Am I in trouble? Mr. Aizawa glared at Zuko. If you keep sleeping in class, you will be. Now come to the front and formally receive your title as class rep, along with your deputy, Yaoyorozu. There was a beat of silence before the boy whisper yelled. How did that happen? Izuku still couldn't believe he was voted as class representative. Everyone in their class was amazing and would have been excellent leaders. I wonder who voted me though. There were 5 of them after all, he pondered as he munched on his lunch. So you didn't vote yourself, Zuko? Todoroki asked. Izuku shook his head. I actually voted for you, Shoto-kun. What? Why'd you vote for half and half instead of me? If you became class rep, you'd just curse our classmates if they don't follow your lead, Kaken, Izuku pointed out while waving his chopstick all around the blonde's face. He wasn't even bothered when his friend growled angrily. He just continued eating. Their table, which was filled with Izuku, Kaken, and Todoroki, remained silent for a minute. The 3 ate their lunches peacefully, until 2 figures approached their table. Hey, Zuko, mind if we sit here? Uraraka asked and showed her tray as an explanation. Izuku looked at Kaken, who was sitting across him glaring daggers at the brunette, and at Todoroki by his side, who looked like he really didn't care either way. Not at all. Make yourselves comfortable. The pair set down their trays and started to eat their lunches, as Izuku also continued with his food. Congratulations on being class rep, Midoriya. I actually voted for you, Ada started. You did. I voted for you too, Zuko, Uraraka declared proudly with her hand raised. Izuku stared at them, like really stared at the two, wondering if they were kidding. I think there are others who could also become good class reps. Oh, for fuck's sake, Zuko, just accept your damn position already. I voted your ass since you're the most capable when compared with those extras. I also voted for you because of your skills in analysis. You helped me create attacks to use against my old man. Izuku blushed and sniffled. He wanted to express his gratitude towards his friends that trusted him enough to become class rep. His friends looked at him fondly, except for Kaken, who still had a scowl as he calmed himself down from happy tears. Izuku tried to smile, but it came out wobbly. Why you guys? I'll make sure to. Before he could finish, an alarm interrupted him, along with a robotic voice of a woman. There has been a level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate outdoors promptly. Panic ensued from the warning, but none of the 5 classmates knew what was going on. Ida managed to ask a 3rd year regarding the alarm, and apparently it meant someone had trespassed on school grounds. Izuku, whose paranoia exceeded that of everyone he met, came to the conclusion that it must be villains. Guys, I'll open a portal leading outside, let's go. His classmates stood up from their seats, and he created a portal in front of them. When Uraraka stepped through, it was at that moment that an excruciating pain ignited from Izuku's head. The brunette would have been severed in half if not for Kaken yanking her back when the portal dematerialized. Izuku grit his teeth and gripped his head harshly to the point where he was ripping out his hair. He screamed. The pain was pounding and pulsating from every direction. He couldn't feel a thing. Yet he feels everything. The blinding light above him, the deafening screams around the mess hall, and the frantic cries of his friends as they figure out what to do. He didn't have any idea how long it lasted, but finally he could feel his consciousness starting to slip away. He relaxed. Izuku relished in the thought of temporary relief from the hellish pain he was experiencing. Todoroki has never been this worried for someone before. Even when his mother was taken away and put in the hospital, he was quite passive. But now, seeing Zuko writhing in pain on the floor, it hurt him. He attempted to get close to his friend, but was immediately stopped by Bakugo. The blonde was clearly shaken up by the situation, what with the alarm still going off and Zuko lying on the ground. Don't come near him half and half, unless you want to get teleported to God knows where, said Bakugo, gritting his teeth in frustration. What's happening to him, Bakugo? Ida asked. He'll explain it to you himself. Now we need to help the nerd first before his quirk grows out of fucking control. Suddenly, the green haze-like energy surrounding Zuko grew even larger in radius along with his screams of pain. The four of them had to back away for a couple of meters, since his quirk was swallowing the tables and chairs, and even chipping off the floor. Students who were calm and still stayed in the mess hall all ran away in panic from Zuko's growing quirk. Fuck, we need to get past those mob of extras, but none of us has a quirk that can do it fast enough. Todoroki looked at Bakugo with a steeled expression. How does that help Zuko right now? His painkillers half and half. He always brings them, so he must have some of it in his school bag. The blonde shouted over the screaming voice of Zuko. Every time the boy's quirk transported something, it made a sound of tearing paper. And considering the large radius of the green energy, the sound was deafening and echoed throughout the cafeteria. Combine that with the frantic yells of panicking students, and it was noise pollution at its peak. I sent a message to the group chat and Mr. Aizawa. Shoji said he'll get some help from the teachers, and Yaoyorozu confirmed that the alarm wasn't urgent. It was just the press that broke through the barrier. Uraraka supplied in a panicked tone. The four of them waited. They trusted their classmates and teachers to come and help as soon as possible. But with every passing second, Zuko's quirk continued to swallow the cafeteria. The whole radius surrounding the greenette was barren. Chairs, tables, and dividers all disappeared in a haze of green energy. Todoroki wanted so badly to rush in and take away all the pain from his friend. Zuko was crying and screaming, and there was nothing they could do to help. Not yet, at least. Is there nothing we could do to help him? He asked, gritting his teeth. None of them replied. They were all balling their fists in rage, and tears were dripping from Uraraka's face. Finally, the first sign of help made itself known. Students, please calm yourselves. The trespassers were the reporters outside the campus. There is no threat. I repeat, there is no threat. The voice of Principal Nezu spoke from the pause system. Please make way for your teachers as they enter the cafeteria. A student's quirk has gone haywire and needs immediate help. Do not crowd the entrance. Todoroki allowed himself to relax a little after hearing that. Hopefully, Zuko would be relieved from his misery. Just then, out of the corner of his eye, Todoroki saw a stray strand of energy going for Uraraka's head. With precise control over his right side, he managed to create a shield device for the brunette. They all watched in horror as the ice structure immediately disappeared in cracked fragments, with just a brush of the void energy. Uraraka backed away with a startled cry. It could have been her head. Thankfully, Todoroki's training didn't fail him when he needed it. We need to stay vigilant of Zuko's quirk. I didn't realize it has so much potential for destruction, he said, worry-laced in his voice. From the cafeteria entrance, there was a telltale sound of help arriving. Pounding feet were steadily approaching them, and the four students finally cried in relief when All Might arrived. In tow, he had Recovery Girl, as well as Snipe and Midnight. Yaoyorozu and Shoji also accompanied the teachers, wearing concerned expressions. Young Bakugo, what's the situation? The side effect of Zuko's quirk acted out of fucking nowhere. It's never been this bad, so I don't know what the fuck happened. What's the plan? We're going to shoot him, Snipe said, without any hint of remorse. What? The four classmates exclaimed simultaneously. Oh, don't overreact. Recovery Girl scolded. Shoji showed us the message that Uraraka sent to your chat. We already found the painkillers, but we also found a specialized tranquilizer gun. The instructions stated that it is custom-made for Midoriya during situations like these. Another particularly loud scream escaped Zuko. We need to help him now, Todoroki growled in impatience. Zuko was in unbearable pain, and they're still talking like it's not an urgent matter. Okay then, Snipe aimed the gun and was about to fire, when Uraraka interrupted. Wait, won't the bullet just disappear when it touches Zuko's quirk? Don't worry, young Uraraka, like Recovery Girl said. This tranquilizer gun and its bullet are specially made for Izuku. It won't be affected by his quirk, and there will be no side effects if he was tranquilized abruptly, All Might said, with a reassuring smile and a thumbs up. Well, here goes nothing. Snipe shot Zuko with extreme precision, hitting him on the side of his neck. Immediately, the energy surrounding the greenette pulsed violently. They thought the tranquilizer failed, but Zuko's quirk dissipated after a moment. The cafeteria was finally silent, save for the heavy breaths of everyone involved. When they were sure that Zuko was unconscious, Todoroki and the others rushed to his side. The chipped floor was uncomfortable to run on, but none of them wanted to slow down. Zuko looked really pale, and he was covered in sweat. His clothes were dirtied by the floor and his hair was disheveled. Todoroki gently picked up the boy, much to Bakugo's chagrin. I'll carry Zuko, half and half. Give him here. No, he's burning up and he needs to cool down. You could end up exploding Zuko with your nitroglycerin sweat, and I can also regulate his temperature while carrying him, Todoroki said as he stood up with Zuko on his arms. His friend was surprisingly light, and it seemed like he perfectly fit within Todoroki's hold. Todoroki's right. Come now, we need to bring him to the clinic fast, Recovery Girl agreed, and led them through the cafeteria. His classmates still looked worried and understandably worn out. They all walked in silence as they passed a few curious students that wanted to see what the commotion was about. Please wake up soon, Zuko. Izuku was at peace. He couldn't remember how it happened, but he wasn't complaining. The bed he was lying on was soft and unbelievably comfortable. It almost rivaled his bed at Island. Someone was also steadily stroking his scalp, and he really liked the sensation. Only his mother used to do that, and Nissan whenever he was sick. He knows he'd have to get up soon. But wanting to feel relaxed wasn't a crime, right? That reminds him, what did happen though? His mind was hazy and it feels like he was being forcibly calmed down by chemicals. That's strange. It only happens when my quirk got out of control. Did I hurt someone? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Izuku rambled, startling Shoto who was stroking his hair. Shoto-kun, are you here in the hospital because I hurt you? Wait, actually, his barrage of words was halted with a surprised yelp. Someone just karate chopped his head mid-conversation. Looking at his other side, Izuku was met with an annoyed Kaken whose veins looked like they could pop off any moment. That hurt Kaken, he whimpered with watery eyes. You really shouldn't attack patients, Bakugo. It's just bad habit, Shoto added from beside him. Well, you shouldn't have been shouting bloody murder as soon as you woke up, you fucker. I was having a peaceful sleep, damn it. Izuku laughed shyly at that. Kaken was actually right, sorry about that. Just as he was about to ask what happened, the door of the clinic rattled violently, and out came a pile of his classmates, toppled on the floor. The three-boy blinked dumbly at how ridiculous their classmates looked. Midoriya, you're awake. Zuko, we were so worried when he heard what happened. Izuku tried to process all their questions, but it was too much for the moment, and he had questions of his own. Actually, can someone tell me what happened first? My mind is still hazy. His classmates looked at each other and began to settle themselves within the clinic. 17 standing students might have looked crowded, but everyone was still comfortable. Well, what's the last thing you remember? Ida asked from the back. Because of his height, he still stood out even though a couple of their classmates were in front of him. He dug through his mind, trying to find the memory his brain remembered last. He recalled being voted class rep. That was insane. He then recalled fighting against his sleepiness during class. He was happy to say that he succeeded in that. And then he had lunch with his friends. He remembered being embarrassed when they admitted that they all voted for him. And then Shoto-kun complimented him on his analysis. That was probably the first compliment I received from him. Midoriya, you okay there, man? You look really red right now, Kirishima asked with concern. The last thing I remember is talking with you guys during lunch. He addressed Shoto-kun and Kaken. Well, after that, there was a level 3 security because the reporters outside trespassed in the school. Everyone panicked and you offered to create a portal to safety. It didn't go well though. You suddenly writhed in pain and your quirk went out of control. It destroyed a good portion of the cafeteria as well, Ida explained in detail. Uraraka giggled in the background. I couldn't have said it better myself. Izuku cringed at the knowledge that he destroyed school property. So I'm guessing Kaken told you about the painkillers I keep in my bag, and you guys found the specialized prototype tranquilizer. Wait, that tranquilizer was a prototype? Shoto asked in disbelief. I'm glad it worked though. What the fuck, Zuko? Why do you even have those precautions, Midoriya? You seem oddly prepared for when you lose control of your quirk, Yaoyorozu inquired confusedly. Well, Izuku began. My quirk allows me to create virtually infinite portals and teleport infinitely, without any drawbacks. But in exchange for not feeling exhaustion when using my quirk, I experience excruciating migraines when someone near me uses a warp quirk. Warp quirks are very rare, but that's still a ridiculously annoying side effect, said Zero. It is annoying, isn't it? A new voice piped up. But do you know what's more annoying? 20 students lodging around in a clinic like it's a hotel lobby. Get out. Let your friend rest. You're not helping him through you insistent questioning, Recovery Girl scolded. His classmates had the decency to look slightly guilty as they all exited the clinic. They all said their goodbyes and hope you get betters. So Izuku also responded with see you laters and thank yous. Only Kaken and Shoto remained inside with him, along with Recovery Girl. Midoriya dear, Principal Nezu wants to have a word with you, if you don't mind. He's actually outside right now, the nurse said kindly. Izuku's face paled. Why did the principal want to meet him? Would he be expelled for destruction of school property? He could still apply for Shikzu if that happened, right? Shoto must have known that he was overthinking again, so the dual-haired boy reached for Izuku's hand and squeezed it reassuringly. He blushed at the gesture. He could come in. Izuku decided. The door opened to reveal a mouse-bear dog creature, with a smile plastered on his cute squishy face. Beside their chimera principal was a tired Mr. Aizawa. The pair sat down on a small bench across the students, and Izuku looked away from the calculative gaze of the principal. He didn't feel comfortable being studied by someone who could be considered as the most intelligent being in Japan. How are you faring, Midoriya? Mr. Aizawa asked and broke the tense atmosphere. I'm doing all right, sir. Once my migraine is treated with pain medication, I'm back to my normal self. That's wonderful news. From what the Island Council told me, this sort of thing only happens when you are exposed with someone possessing a warp quirk, correct? Nezu asked this time. Yeah, someone with a warp quirk must have also thought of teleporting away from the cafeteria. That's the problem, Midoriya. No one in UA possesses a warp quirk apart from you, Mr. Aizawa sighed. No one has a warp quirk in UA, but that definitely felt like his quirk's side effect. Is he losing control over his own power? That couldn't be. First, his immunity with One for All, and now this. Why did his quirk show its instability now that he was away from the scientists that studied it, out of anxiety? He unconsciously gripped Shoto's hand tighter. Maybe it's one of the reporters that trespassed? What exactly is the range of your side effect? Shoto asked, rubbing circles on Izuku's knuckles with his other hand. Stop overthinking, nerd. You'd give yourself a migraine. Well, whatever the case might be, the specialized tranquilizer only had one bullet. All Might and I have already contacted the Island Council regarding the situation. They will transport you a supply of bullets later this evening, Nezu informed. So I'm not getting expelled for destruction of property. The Chimera chuckled lightly. Why no? If anything, it was our fault for letting those reporters trespass, thus exposing you to the only weakness of your quirk. Don't worry, we will ensure that this incident does not repeat in the future. Izuku sighed in relief. Thank you, sir. So Midoriya, are you sure you're completely fine now? At the Greenette's enthusiastic nod, Aizawa continued, if that's the case, you'll be allowed to attend the special exercise tomorrow. Make sure to get plenty of rest, you will all need it. The adults left shortly after that. Izuku looked at the two boys accompanying him, and they have completely different expressions. Shoto-kun was as passive as ever, never really showing what he thought of the encounter. Kaken, on the other hand, had an annoyed scowl on his face. He looked like one breath away from smacking Izuku to oblivion. You fucking nerd. Did you seriously thought they'd expel you or some shit? Unfortunately, no adults were present to reprimand the blonde. Kaken, I have no idea about the damage I caused and how much I destroyed. Of course I thought of the worst case scenario. The entire cafeteria was a wreck. All tables and chairs disappeared. You'd think the place was abandoned years ago. Shoto-kun deadpan, still holding Izuku's hand. The statement completely shut down Izuku. He dropped Shoto-kun's hand and stared at Kaken with blank eyes. Jumping off a high building seems really appealing right now. Is it possible to just go and die? Half and half. What the fuck are you talking about? It wasn't completely destroyed. You'll give Zuko a heart attack. Oh, I was joking, Zuko. Was this a bad time? Shoto-kun asked, confused. Kaken facepalmed so hard, Izuku flinched at the sound. I thought it was a good time to lighten up the mood. Did I do it wrong? Yes, you fucking moron. You did it wrong because this was definitely a bad time. Izuku just laughed loudly on his bed, looking over at the two boys bickering. Well, more like Kaken scolding Shoto-kun, and the dual-haired boy just staring blankly at the blonde. Izuku watched them fondly, thinking that he'd never exchange his friends for anything. The next day, everyone was buzzing with excitement. Lunch just ended, and 1A was already dressed in their hero costumes, prepared for the bus ride towards Mr. Aizawa knows where. Luckily for Izuku's well-being, the cafeteria was already fixed, so he didn't see the damage he caused yesterday. As they were nearing the bus, Ada approached him. Midoriya, shouldn't you ask our classmates to form a line? You know, so that entering the bus would be orderly. Izuku pondered for a moment. I don't think it's necessary. Our classmates are mature enough not to cause commotion over entering a bus. True to what he said, 1A smoothly entered the bus and chose their seats quickly. Izuku sat between Ada and Asui as the bus started to move towards their destination. So, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu started from the back. I was wondering if you take pain medication every time your quirk's side effect manifests. Relying on those might be bad for your health in the long run. Oh, don't worry, Yaoyorozu. The painkillers I take are also personalized just for my quirk. They're not harmful at all, Izuku replied cheerily. Where do you even get yourself personalized medicine and tranquilizers? Does UA supply you with those? Kirishima asked from beside Asui. I realized just now that you guys don't know that I'm from my island, he chuckled lightly. A chorus of questions were thrown at him. It was chaotic. But even so, Mr. Aizawa seemed to not care about how loud his classmates were, so he just decided to explain further. My father is actually one of the most prominent scientists there. So, creating my specialized medical needs aren't really difficult for him and his subordinates. I must admit, I've never heard of a Dr. Midoriya before, Asui pondered with a finger on her chin. Oh, he's not actually my biological father. His classmate looked like she was about to ask another question. But it was interrupted by Mr. Aizawa. Enough messing around, we're here. The class excitedly exited the bus, while still maintaining order like Izuku predicted. Just outside their vehicle stood none other than the rescue hero 13. 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬 and the rest of 1A followed the hero inside the facility where their training would commence. Apparently, this training ground was called Unforeseen Simulation Joint. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 found it quite amusing that 13 deliberately chose words that would abbreviate into USJ, just like Universal Studios Japan. What a fun hero. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 totally understood why Uraraka was having a fangirl panic just beside him. 13 seemed to be one of her favorite heroes, with them having the same space-themed quirks and costumes. The rescue hero started off with a speech about how all of their quirks could easily kill, just as it could easily be used for good, and 𝐬𝐡𝐢 was inclined to agree. After all, his quirk could level an entire building when he loses control. Actually, that already happened in an island. He didn't even realize that the speech was over as everyone began to clap. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 was still lost in thought about how dangerous his quirk really was, when Mr. Aizawa called him to the front. "Please step forward, Midoriya." 𝐬𝐡𝐢 stood beside Mr. Aizawa, and the teacher continued, "As the class representative, you will lead today's exercise." The class voiced their awe, while the very notion of leading an exercise terrified 𝐬𝐡𝐢. Consider it as your first leadership role. This will also be graded as a class exercise, so make sure to give it your best. Plus ultra and all that. Could you specify our objective, Mr. Aizawa?" he asked nervously. "I wasn't done explaining actually. Basically, you have to save 40 training dummies, evenly scattered on 4 different zones. The ruins, conflagration, flood, and mountain zones will be your assignment for today. It will be up to you, Midoriya, on how you will tackle this problem. But there will have a time limit of 3 hours for 40 dummies." Mr. Aizawa, isn't that a little too advanced for us? The first week of school isn't even over yet. Asui voiced her concerns. "That may be so, but there is no better teacher than experience. Besides, you won't face any real danger. 13 can see everything going on within USJ from her control room. Should any mishaps occur, she can initiate a complete shutdown of all the hazards of each zone." 𝐬𝐡𝐢's resolve steeled, and his mind was already whirring with ideas on how to successfully finish this exercise. "How many minutes do I have for planning, Mr. Aizawa?" His teacher grinned at his determination. "You'll have 5 minutes." 𝐬𝐡𝐢 returned the grin and looked back at his classmates. Everyone had a determined glint in their eyes, and 𝐬𝐡𝐢 couldn't wait to make it burn brighter. Mr. Aizawa had given the class a list of what their classmates' quirks could do, and combined with his own, their class could be the perfect team for rescue and combat. "Okay guys, here's the plan." 𝐬𝐡𝐢 observed his classmates carefully and cataloged their quirks along with its different uses. For a rescue operation such as this, the most useful quirks would be Zero Gravity, Creation, Pop-Off, Earphone Jack, Dupli Arms, and Frog. He would need to effectively scatter his classmates that wield the most versatile quirks for rescue. "Okay guys, here's the plan. I will separate us into 4 groups with 5 members whose quirks are best suited for each zone. Gyro, Uraraka, Mayuta, Sato, and Kaminari will take the ruins. Gyro, you will work on reconnaissance, while the rest will work on the actual rescue." The 5 teens nodded, and a hand was raised from the back. "What is it, Yaoyorozu? I get why you chose this particular group for the ruins zone. Gyro can locate the victims, Uraraka can make the debris weightless so that Sato can easily remove them, and Mayuta can stabilize unsteady structures with his quirk. But I fail to see how Kaminari's quirk can be of use in the ruins." "Yeah dude, how will I help?" added the electric blonde. "Out of all the zones Mr. Aizawa mentioned, the ruins is the one that will have the least amount of natural light. Buildings will block out the sun, so it will be difficult to navigate through that maze of debris. That's why you will be their guiding light, Kaminari." 𝐬𝐡𝐢 pointed at him with a wide smile. "Their guiding light?" Kaminari asked dumbly. He beamed at the boy, and looked at Yaoyorozu shyly. Yaoyorozu, can I maybe ask for you to make some lighting equipment for Kaminari, but don't put any batteries on them. That way, you can preserve your lipids, and Kaminari can provide much-needed help." "Oh I see. That's actually good thinking, Midoriya. I'll make them right away." Yaoyorozu praised and got on to work. "Okay, for the mountain zone, we'll have Zero, Kota, Kaken, Shoji, and Mina. Just like in the ruins zone, Shoji will locate the victims, while the others will work together for rescue." "Hell yeah, we'll save all those extras the fastest. So keep up." There was a chorus of disagreement regarding Kaken's statement, but 𝐬𝐡𝐢 ignored it. "For the conflagration zone team, it will be Kirishima, Shoto-kun, Yaoyorozu, and Aoyama," he added instead. Kirishima raised his hand. "Why are there only 4 of us in the conflagration? It's gotta be the most dangerous out of the zones. We'll need all the help we can get." "It's exactly why there are only 4 of you. The conflagration zone is extremely dangerous, so I couldn't risk putting someone there whose quirk isn't suited for the scorching environment. Kirishima, your hardening can repel high temperatures and it also allows you to easily destroy walls when needed. Shoto-kun also has resistance to heat because his quirk and he can assist in stabilizing falling parts. What about me and Aoyama?" We don't have a quirk that allows us to combat high temperatures. Indeed, my sparkle alone can't extinguish the flames. I was thinking you guys would support Shotokan and Kirishima from a distance. If a stray debris comes falling down to the tomb unnoticed, Aoyama could easily destroy it with his precision of naval laser. And you can create fire extinguishers as well as fire-resistant clothing, Yaoyorozu. That could work, Ida voiced. And for the final zone, the flood zone, we'll have Asui, Ida, Tokoyami, and Ajiro. I told you to call me Tsu. Izuku chuckled shyly at her remark. Oh, how about me, Midoriya? I hope you didn't forget just because I'm invisible. 𝐻𝐡𝐚𝐭 hopped on spot, judging by how her shoes lifted off the ground a couple of times. Don't worry, 𝐻𝐡𝐭. You'll come with me for the second part of the plan, Izuku reassured with a smile. What's the second part of the plan, Zuku? Shoto asked. 𝐻𝐡𝐭 will facilitate our makeshift evacuation area, where we will collect all 40 dummies, maybe right by the fountain. Making sure everything is in order and tallying the rescued victims from each zone will be your job. And of course, I'll be the one transporting the dummies to you. With my quirk, I could appear anywhere in the facility within a moment's notice. Whoa, that's actually a really solid plan, Midoriya, Minda complimented. Zero raised his hand. But don't you need to actually see where you're going before teleporting there? The height of the dome allows me to see everything in USJ while I'm up in the air. And I could quickly teleport to safety after memorizing the location I want. Another advantage we have is that I can transport our classmates wherever they are needed, so don't hesitate to ask for backup, Izuku said as he handed out 19 earpieces that Mr. Aizawa gave him. Everyone adjusted their comms, and the determined looks they gave Izuku sent chills down his spine. He grinned. Let's do this. Toshinori quietly entered the principal's office. He was supposed to go with 1A for their trip to USJ, but he requested a private meeting with Nezu. The situation with Izuku's quirk is starting to get out of hand. First his immunity to One for All, and now the future that Night Eye saw. His nephew's quirk was proving to be even more powerful than they initially thought. You must be aware of the keen senses of a mouse, bear, and dog, All Might. Sneaking in like that will not go unnoticed by me, I assure you. Toshinori would never admit the startled shriek he let out when the chimera suddenly appeared behind him. He sincerely hoped the principal wouldn't prank him by showing the CCTV footage to the staff. I didn't factor that when I entered. Please don't do that again, Principal. I can't promise for sure. But enough of that. What is the urgent matter you wanted to discuss? Well, it's rather complicated, but it involves One for All, as well as Izuku. The principal hummed in understanding, and poured himself some green tea. All Might, I have a feeling that our chat will be longer than usual. Nezu was quiet the entire time Toshinori explained their findings. From the experiments he and Mirio did on Island, to what Night Eye saw. It still gave him chills every time he thinks about a future composed solely of celestial bodies. Even with all the ridiculously absurd information Toshinori shared, the principal still didn't look too bothered. What has Nezu seen to elicit almost no reaction from him? I must say, I wasn't surprised to find that the matter was somehow related to Midoriya. The boy's quirk is quite powerful, but still, I didn't expect the matter to be this big. What do you mean this big? Surely it's not so bad. Not now maybe, but it might become troublesome. I assume you told me this so I can determine the perfect way to learn about Midoriya's quirk. Toshinori sighed. Yes, I was hoping for that. I'm afraid I have the same conclusion as Night Eye. We need to conduct proper experiments to understand Midoriya's quirk. As it stands now, it is both a great tool and a dangerous adversary. Don't you think this matter is something we should also discuss with the Island Council? What? Why? They are the ones that had a decade to study Midoriya's quirk after all. If anyone has any idea to what's happening, it could only be them. Your friend, David Shield, deserves to know what's happening with his child. But their safety would be jeopardized if you tell them about One for All. Nezu finished for him. The principal refilled his teacup before continuing. Tell me, All Might, is it really a matter of protecting them? Or a matter of trust that you don't want to give information about One for All? Toshinori looked at Nezu with determined eyes that has seen what it was like to be on the receiving end of a great evil. For generations, One for All has been a secret hidden by its users and close friends alone. The burden we have shouldn't be shared with anyone else. Nezu hummed in thought. I say it's time to break that tradition of absolute secrecy. Each generation of OFA users was defeated by All for One because they faced the threat alone. You were lucky enough to have survived an encounter with that fiend and ended him at the same time. I'm not saying you should announce your power to the rest of the world. Just get yourself a number of powerful allies. The same should also apply to Tagata, should he take your mantle as a symbol. I'll think about it, Principal. He surrendered and finished his cold cup of tea. Izuku was slick with sweat as he teleported back and forth within USJ. It was tiring, but also extremely exhilarating. Everyone was fired up, and he couldn't afford to be left behind. Just like he expected, the team on the ruins zone was the most effective for rescue. Within an hour, they managed to rescue 7 dummies, which was more than any other team had rescued. Well, apart from the flood zone that is, since the emergency required immediate attention to prevent the victims from drowning. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 personally worked with the flood zone team. It was an extremely fast rescue considering 𝐀𝐦 was leading them. With all 10 dummies safely transported to 𝐓𝐻𝐸 station, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 scattered the flood team throughout the 3 remaining zones. You guys need any assistance here? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 asked as he stepped through a portal. We don't need your help here, nerd. Why don't you bother the other extras? Shoji sighed. Actually, we could use your help, Midoriya. Okay, what do you guys need? 𝐀𝐦 leapt down from the side of a small hill. After the flood team finished, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 transported 𝐀𝐦 and Takoyami to the mountain zone, where their quirks could be useful again. We need to remove that big chunk of rock, Ribbit. There's 2 victims inside, but none of us can fit in that small opening. Not to mention it will be difficult to bring up the victims, the frog girl said as she pointed at a 10-foot rock, covering a hole on the ground. Okay, that's easy. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 scanned his surroundings and looked for an area where he could safely transport the rock. Guys, could you steer off that area? I'll put the rock there, he said, pointing to a flat spot where Takoyami and Mina stood. When everything was clear, he created a void orb on his hand and let it touch the boulder. Unlike other times, 𝐬𝐻𝐸's quirk needed prolonged contact with the large rock. Since it's too big for a small void orb, he needed to keep supplying his void orb with void energy from himself. The void energy would need to envelop the entire boulder, or else it would just scrape off the top part where his quirk touched. This was also one of 𝐬𝐻𝐸's limitations. The larger the object, the longer he needs to transport them. With a sound of tearing paper, the boulder reappeared on the barren clearing he pointed at. But the sudden loss of the rock also meant the loss of 𝐬𝐻𝐸's foothold. Luckily, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was quick enough to catch him with tape before he touched the surface. You need to be careful, Midoriya. Are you okay? Sorry about that. I guess I didn't think that one through. He scratched his head bashfully. Clumsy nerd. Kaken mumbled behind him, but 𝐬𝐻𝐸 still heard it. Takoyami and 𝐀𝐦 gently picked up the victims with their quirks and settled them beside 𝐬𝐻𝐸. The dummies weigh like an average adult, and they were colored in blue for some reason. Well, he supposed it didn't matter as long as it works. 𝐓𝐻𝐸, please show me a safe area to open a portal, he said to his comms. This time, he gave the detachable camera connected to his visor to the invisible girl. With her help, he could quickly transport the dummies from any zone to the fountain. With an affirmative hum, 𝐓𝐻𝐸 showed him a blank area. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 quickly made a portal leading there, and the mountain zone team helped the invisible girl settle the victims in the makeshift evacuation area. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 closed the portal behind him as he stepped through. The orderly evacuation area made him choke a bit. Seems like 𝐓𝐻𝐸 really put her heart on the task. Instead of looking like frantic victims, his invisible classmate arranged the dummies in 4 perfectly straight lines. It looked like they were just lining up to watch a blockbuster movie. 𝐓𝐻𝐸, you don't have to arrange them like that if you're tired. The girl looked confused at first, but then she laid eyes on her work. Oh, you mean that? Don't worry, I just like seeing them lined up and orderly. That way, we'll know which team completed first, and the ones that took care of the victims like real people. That's actually really good thinking. I viewed this entire exercise as just training, but I should have seen it as an actual rescue operation. The victims should be carried differently based on their injuries. I should pay attention to that. And then there's also, Midoriya, whoa. That's enough word vomit. We should focus on the task at hand. There are only 2 more dummies needed for the mountain and ruins zone, so you should go help out the conflagration. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 blushed madly for being called out. Why yeah, I'll do that, he chuckled nervously. Conflagration team, do you copy? We need help with this certain building, Midoriya. Yaoyorozu responded through the comms. This is the last building we haven't checked, so the 4 dummies must be inside. Is it the tallest building in your zone? It is. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 let a void orb manifest in his hand and grasped it. He reappeared at the highest point of the USJ, free-falling through the air like a ragdoll. The tallest structure from the conflagration zone burned brightly, so 𝐬𝐻𝐸 found it easy to locate. Through a series of portals, the greenette finally reached the ground and stood with the conflagration team. The entire zone was scorching hot. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 felt like he could faint just from the temperature. Not to mention, his costume was not suited for this environment at all. Are you guys alright? It's so hot in here. I feel bad for putting you in this zone. Nah, don't sweat it, Midoriya. It's totally cool, Kirishima assured with a wide smile. Yeah, and it's just like you said. Our other classmates wouldn't be able to protect themselves while they're here, so it's up to us, said Shoto as he approached 𝐬𝐻𝐸. The class rep looked at the other 2 members of the team, and they looked different from the start of the exercise. Yaoyorozu was clad in heat-resistant clothing, and Aoyama took off his armor as well. The sparkly blonde was now wearing the same heat-resistant outfit as Yaoyorozu, and had several fire-extinguishing gadgets on his person. Aoyama, are you doing all right? Oui, monsieur. It's quite hot here, but I shall manage. These flames will not outsparkle me. The blonde replied with overly dramatic gestures. Izuku found it daring to see his classmate act so casual about their exercise. Have you guys scouted the building yet? The building is hard to traverse, and it will be dangerous to check every floor, 𝐬𝐬 replied. Looking at the 7-story building, it was true that checking each floor would be difficult, especially if they don't have an immediate escape. Even with Izuku's quirk, the task would still be quite dangerous. 𝐬𝐬, could you make me some extinguisher bombs, just in case? The black-haired girl nodded as she created 3 bombs. Her palms glowed in a multicolor light, and on it appeared what Izuku requested for. Here you go. They detonate on extreme heat, so make sure that they don't fall from your costume once inside the burning building. Thank you, I'll be careful with it. Izuku looked at Kirishima with a nervous smile. Please accompany me, Kirishima. I'll need someone to watch my back. No problem, man. Let's do this. Izuku's smile widened as he approached the redhead and grasped his wrist. Don't let go, okay? You'd be injured when you fall from the height of a 7-story building. He grinned cheekily. Kirishima had no time to utter a reply as the ground disappeared beneath their feet. The redhead choked on his scream while Izuku put his full focus on the fast-approaching structure. He needed to teleport both of them a couple of feet above the target building, so that he could have a longer time to see a safe spot to teleport. When he saw a small area untouched by the flames on the 7th floor, Izuku made another void orb and grasped it. They safely reappeared inside the burning building with a startled scream from Kirishima. Izuku laughed lightly. I'm sorry for the scary experience, Kirishima. I didn't expect it to be frightening because I trusted you, but that was still kinda scary, the redhead replied with his arms still shaking. Well, let's get down to business. Yeah, to defeat this fire. Izuku sing-songed with a knowing grin. Kirishima grinned back and hardened his skin as they prepared to search for the 4 dummies. The first thing he noticed was that navigating the building would be even harder with the smoke coming from the flames. Izuku covered his mouth with his respirator and saw Kirishima doing the same with a mask he got from 𝐬𝐬. The greenette lead the way through the 7th floor, checking every corner so that they don't miss anything. Izuku could feel his sweat accumulating within his costume, his eyes tearing up from all the smoke, and his throat drying just from being in this zone. Izuku constantly brought water to the conflagration team, even as he helped on the other zones. He initially thought that they just needed water because they were tired and needed to cool off, but now he was sure it was because of dehydration. Looking at his partner, Kirishima also seems to be thirsty. They needed to finish fast. When they rounded a corner, Izuku spotted a feet of a dummy. He threw a void orb at it, and the blue dummy emerged beside them. Found one. We need to bring it down this instant though. We can't bring it with us. Kirishima just nodded instead of replying. They returned to where they entered and looked down at the destroyed wall. Izuku just needed a momentary gaze at his other 3 classmates down below, and the victim was transported to safety. 3 to go. The pair cautiously treaded the burning building, occasionally getting water to drink with the courtesy of Izuku. They found the 2nd dummy on the 6th floor, and the 3rd dummy at the 3rd floor. Their operation was going smoothly until they reached the 2nd floor. Izuku had just stepped off the staircase when a part of the ceiling fell down on him. Luckily, Kirishima shouldered the debris with his hardened skin before it hit the greenette. They didn't even have any respite when another part of the ceiling broke down. This time, Izuku threw a void orb at the rubble and it disappeared somewhere around the 3rd floor. The fire down here was burning, causing Izuku's eyes to dry out. They had no time to chat, so they just started the search. Izuku really thought everything was good. The exercise only had about 45 minutes left, and they have already found 37 out of the 40 dummies. They would have passed with flying colors if it wasn't for a certain pesky villain group. The class rep felt the telltale sign of his quirk going haywire. He gripped his head in the feeble attempt of easing the pain. Kirishima must have spotted him kneeling on hot concrete and immediately went to his side. Midoriya, what's wrong? Is your quirk again? Ghetto out. Stay away far from me. No way, man. We need to. Izuku tossed a controlled void orb at his classmate, transporting him out of danger before his uncontrolled quirk teleports the redhead to somewhere he doesn't know. Fortunately, Izuku brought a dose of his pain medication, so he took that out of his utility belt and swallowed the pill. It took maybe a minute or 2 before the pain subsided and he immediately teleported outside where the conflagration team was. Guys, I'm alright now. Don't panic, please, he shouted urgently. Turns out, he was just in time as his classmates were already attempting to enter the building. Zuko, are you alright? Shoto asked frantically and ran over to Izuku. Dude, you scared me. What happened there? Said Kirishima. Someone used a warp quirk here in the USJ. I don't know how that's possible though. We're the only ones here, Izuku explained with a frown. Midoriya, your eyes are sparkling. Oh, that's a side effect of the pain medication I took. My eyes will keep glowing as long as I'm near that warp quirk user. Mr. Aizawa, is everything? Before 𝐬𝐬 could finish her question through the comms, all their earpieces crackled with electricity. They managed to take it out before the device short-circuited inside their ears. What was that? Kirishima asked. From a block across them, Izuku spotted a contrast of black from the bright orange that surrounded the zone. A swirling dark energy was condensing, and finally became a portal. His eyes widened as several people stepped through. He didn't want to judge anyone based on their looks, but these particular group really looked like low-level thugs. Maybe we could ask them, he voiced, and caught the attention of his confused classmates. A portal? That must be why your quirk has gone haywire again, Midoriya Aoyama said with his smile faltering. The villainous-looking individuals finally came close enough, and one of them addressed the students. Oh look, hero wannabes, let's kill them. The feral grin that the man wore sent chills to Izuku. This isn't a part of the exercise, right? So you're doing a hero exercise? That's cute. Well, sorry for crashing in the party, but we have orders to wreak havoc. Izuku's eyes darkened as he switched to a fighting stance and created a void orb on each palm. They're definitely not friendly, so let's show them how we should greet trespassers. From Izuku's initial count, it would be 5 against 20, more or less, but even with their disadvantage in number, they would definitely have an edge when it comes to power. Izuku was the first to engage as he teleported behind one of the bigger villains. With a well-placed kick, the man immediately fell unconscious. This seemed to rouse both sides as everyone charged towards Izuku. Too bad for them. He was already beside his classmates once they reached his previous position. I need you guys to cover me. I have a plan. His 4 classmates nodded and dashed towards the villains. Kirishima tanked most of the attacks, and Shoto froze enemies on place. Since the environment had high temperature, the usual power of Shoto's ice weakened. Aoyama and Yaoyorozu stayed behind the 2 boys, and were responsible for ranged attacks. Finally, Izuku completed his preparation. Aoyama, I need you to blast me with your quirk, trust me. No further questions were asked as a stream of blue laser came towards Izuku. He created a portal that redirected the blast directly above the enemies, and on the right moment, he teleported what he was holding. Just before the laser could hit any enemy, a bundle of 3 extinguisher bombs appeared. An explosion of white gas enveloped the villains and put out the surrounding flames. Shoto, freeze them now. A burst of ice, much larger than before, encased all of their opponents. Kirishima breathed a sigh of relief since he safely backed away just before it could reach him. The 5 classmates allowed themselves to calm down when they noticed that none of the villains could get away from the ice. Their battle of survival has only just begun, and Izuku still needed to make sure the others were safe. Izuku was overthinking on what to do next. The hazards inside the conflagration zone have all been shut down, so it stands to reason that the threat was real. 13 must have stopped the exercise to signal everyone about the severity of the situation. He was glad that their enemies didn't prove difficult to defeat. All the villains that they captured were now unconscious and thawed from the ice. After all, Shoto's quirk could cause them severe hypothermia if left unattended. His 4 friends still looked shaken from the battle, but they didn't seem discouraged. What do we do now, Midoriya? We need to help our other classmates, said Kirishima. I know, but we need to prioritize going to the fountain first. What? Why? Yaoyorozu asked as they all stood before Izuku. The mountain team has Kaken, Tokoyami, and Mina with combat-oriented quirks. Same with the ruins zone with Ida, Sato, and Ajiro. If the villains they encounter are the same level with the ones we took down, it would be easy for them. But Hagakure was alone by the fountain, and she can't handle a group of villains. But shouldn't we contact the school first? There are many unknowns to this situation. What if the main campus is also under attack? They wouldn't be able to provide backup if that's the case, Shoto concluded. Izuku sighed. Not to mention that warp user. Oh yeah, how are you holding up, man? My pain meds will combat the side effect of my quirk for now, but it will only last for 45 minutes. Once that time ends and I'm still in the presence of a warp user, it won't be good for anyone. His classmates didn't have time to reply as an unfamiliar voice spoke through the pause system. Greetings, hero students. We are the League of Villains, and we invited ourselves to your little exercise for one reason only, to retrieve the student Izuku Midoriya. Bakugo knew something was wrong when Zuko suddenly stopped responding to the comms. They already found the last dummy in the mountain zone, and was waiting for the nerd to transport it. Honestly, they could just walk towards the fountain, but the damn extras were way too lazy. Fucking idiots. He was leaning on a wall of a mountain as he waited for his friend to respond. His signature scowl directed at anyone who annoyed him. Bakugo's patience was already running thin when a swirl of black smoke condensed in the middle of a flat area. Maybe it was a gut feeling or something in the air, but he immediately knew that it was bad news. Look alive, extras. We have company. All conversations stopped as everyone began to notice the black swirl. Before long, several extras walked out of the ominous portal, and their appearance basically screamed villain. Even with their painfully obvious agenda, Bakugo wouldn't judge someone just by their face. At least Zuko told him not to. So, he nicely asked, "Who the fuck are you?" Huh, what a vulgar mouth for a hero wannabe. I guess everyone's unique. 𝗵𝗃𝐸 felt his eye twitch and his palms were detonating tiny sparks. What the fuck did you just say? Hey, who are you guys? 𝐍𝗏 asked again, in behalf of 𝗵𝗃𝐸. We're here to kill you, so at least make it entertaining. The immediate charge of the villain startled a curse from 𝗵𝗃𝐸. Luckily, his classmates weren't idiots as they quickly switched into fighting positions. The frog and the multi-armed guy charged with him, while the rest stayed behind for ranged support. The low-level thugs fell one after another with every explosion he released. Frog Girl caused the villains to lose footing as she jumped from face to face, and the smaller opponents had no match for the hulking figure of the duply armed guy. With some dumb luck, some of the villains managed to get past the three and headed for his other classmates. That's where 𝐍𝗏 and Tokoyami offered their aid. Dark Shadow clawed at any enemy that got close, and 𝐍𝗏's tape trapped the others. 𝗵𝗃𝐸 grinned when he saw that the villains stood no chance of defeating them. Even Raccoon Eyes was handling them well despite having to protect the animal whisperer. One of the thugs had the fucking audacity to bring a gun and aimed at 𝗵𝗃𝐸. He maneuvered himself with explosions to confuse the shooter, but the bitch must have been an idiot. She shot twice, completely missing 𝗵𝗃𝐸 and hitting her allies instead. Hey Flatface, tape up this fucking idiot. Who you calling Flatface? 𝐍𝗏 shouted, but complied nonetheless. The few remaining villains have been taken care of, and wrapped in 𝐍𝗏's tape. 𝗵𝗃𝐸 took it upon himself to interrogate the thugs. So losers, tell me why the hell you decided to ruin our class. You better answer me, or I'll blow up your skulls to oblivion, he threatened with little explosions going off on his palms. Well, we won't do that. We're heroes, 𝗵𝗃𝐸, Mina reasoned. I think he's just saying that to scare them, said 𝐴sui. The pink girl's face morphed from confusion to realization. Oh, is that true? 𝗵𝗃𝐸 palmed his face, frustration clear in his expression. Well, no shit. Raccoon Eyes, Mina mouthed a sorry while the others shook their head disapprovingly. 𝗵𝗃𝐸 had no time for this. The others were also surely in danger, but if their opponents were like these freaks, there's no real trouble. With a feral grin, he turned back to the tied villains. I might not kill you, but I have other ways to make you talk. Recovery Girl can easily fix you when everything's over. The group of 20 looked horrified and were shaking within their binds. A woman with full black eyes looked the most scared, considering 𝗵𝗃𝐸 was directly looking at her. The same one that shot her allies. You, the stupidest in here. Tell me why you're all here. They didn't give us the full details. But the one thing they said is to look out for a green-haired boy. They said he's the target and should be left unharmed. 𝗵𝗃𝐸's thoughts halted. The only green-haired boy in their class was Zuko. But how did they even know about him? All his information were disclosed by 𝐸 knowing he could be a target because of his rare quirk. 𝗵𝗃𝐸's fists clenched as he glared at the woman. Please, that's all I know. Don't hurt me, please. TCH. It's Zuko. But what would they want with Midoriya? Is it because of his quirk? Tokoyami asked behind 𝗵𝗃𝐸. The rest of the mountain team stood with the bird boy, also worried for their class rep. Whatever the reason, we can't let them get to him. But these villains are losers. Zuko can take them on, so I'm not worried. That is true. Midoriya will be quite hard to catch with his warp quirk. Ribbit, 𝐴sui agreed, tapping her chin. Beside her, Koda also nodded vigorously. Greetings, hero students. We are the League of Villains, and we invited ourselves to your little exercise for one reason only, to retrieve the student Izuku Midoriya. If you didn't run away with your handy quirk, Midoriya, I suggest you teleport to the fountain. It will be a shame if 13 and Eraserhead meet their demise so early in their careers. 𝗵𝗃𝐸 felt his blood run cold at the threat. Whether or not they were serious about it doesn't matter. Zuko's self-sacrificing bullshit would surely take the bait. He needed to make sure the nerd doesn't do anything that he'd regret later. Hey extras, let's go save our fucking class rep. Uraraka's adrenaline was sky high. The exercise was going smoothly just a few minutes ago, but now a mob of villains was after them. He had to lead the charge against the trespassers together with Sato and Anjiro. The three of them worked surprisingly well, and Jiraiya also provided long-range support with her stereo boots. Uraraka sneaked up onto the nearest villain and used her quirk. Jiraiya tossed them all away. Her classmate instantly understood and used her stereo boots to easily push away the weightless villain. Their strategy worked as Uraraka made villains weightless while Jiraiya flung them away with sound waves. Minato and Kaminari also worked surprisingly well. The small grape trapping opponents with his quirk, and the electric blonde would electrocute the easy targets, but they didn't notice one of the enemies sneaking up to them. Minato was easily snatched up by the villain and held at knife point. Don't move or this squirt will be relieved of his head. The Ruins team all froze at the threat. They all stared horrified at the crying Minato, struggling to stay away from the knife as best as he could. Uraraka's body refused to obey. As she tried to move her feet, she was shaking from fear and frustration, unable to do anything but watch as Kaminari, who stood next to the hostage, slowly inched closer. When he was close enough, he released a discharge of electricity that paralyzed the villain and Minato. He immediately took hold of the small grape and fully electrocuted the villain. At that point, the battle resumed, or at least 𝐸𝐸 expected it to resume. Turns out, her classmates were all held captive while 𝐀𝐦 executed his plan. 𝐸𝐸 was forced to kneel as he was stabbed by a villain on his leg. 𝐬𝐸t𝐻 was tied by a woman with moving hair, while 𝐸𝐸 was also trapped. You better give up. It's just the three of you left. A villain that was holding Gyro's neck threatened. Greetings, hero students. We are the League of Villains, and we invited ourselves to your little exercise for one reason only, to retrieve the student Izuku Midoriya. If you didn't run away with your handy quirk, Midoriya, I suggest you teleport to the fountain. It will be a shame if 13 and Eraserhead meet their demise so early in their careers. Hear that? You can't win, even your teachers are captured. 𝐸𝐸 didn't know what to do. They wanted Zuko, but why? Did the teachers really lose? She really hoped it was just all a bad dream. Tears fell down her eyes as she looked at 𝐀𝐦 hopelessly. They had no choice but to surrender, so she reluctantly raised her arms. The shame of loss was immediately washed away by a sound of tearing paper. A green portal manifested behind the villains who were too confused by the situation. The Ruins team looked at it with hope, as a surge of ice came rushing towards the enemies. Within seconds, everyone was engulfed by the glacier. Todoroki. They all cried in relief as their classmates stepped through the portal. The dual-haired boy nodded at them, and thawed his classmates that were slightly caught in his attack. 𝐸𝐸 was quick to stand up and offer help when 𝐸𝐸 stopped him. 𝐸𝐸, take it easy. You're injured, remember, 𝐸𝐸 said, worry laced in her tone. She helped her classmate stand up and led him to a flat debris to sit down. The others also sat by them, and it was 𝐸𝐸 that started the conversation. Todoroki, where's the rest of your teammates? Zuko had a plan that benefited everyone. He used a portal to see who was having trouble with the villains and sent me here to help you. The others had their own missions to accomplish. 𝐸𝐸 balled her fist. She couldn't imagine the pressure on Zuko as the class rep and the target of these villains. But his mind still had clarity to devise a plan. Will he comply with what the villains said? Todoroki sighed in frustration. We told him not to take the risk, but he won't listen. His plan seemed foolproof, but only time can tell. For now, the next part of the plan is that we rendezvous on the fountain. Everyone nodded. They all had trust and respect for their class rep, and the least they could do is execute his plan. Guys, what about them? They'll freeze to death if we left them in Todoroki's eyes. Anjiro piped up. I say we let them freeze to death. Minter rallied jokingly, with 𝐀𝐦 supporting him on the background. No, everyone else scolded. Izuku hesitantly stepped out of the portal he created. The other members of the conflagration team were already teleported for their parts of the plan, and now he must take command of the situation. Izuku already knew of the situation in the fountain, as he was able to see it through bird's eye view with a portal. But seeing it in this perspective really hit different. He froze at the sight of Mr. Aizawa and 13 who unconscious and pinned by a hulking figure, far larger than Uncle Toshi. All around him, villains stood patiently, waiting for the command of that man masked with a hand. What a weirdo. Like what you see. This is my bioengineered weapon called 𝐸𝐸. Its strength matches All Might. Isn't it cool? The creepy hand villain mockingly mused. When Izuku didn't reply, the villain laughed. What? Are you too afraid to speak now, hero? Let's ease up the tension, shall we? Ontamura Shigaraki. Now, tell me your name. Izuku clenched his fists and subtly looked at the timer Yaoyorozu gave him. Still 5 minutes to go. He looked at Shigaraki and decided to indulge the villain for now. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I already knew that. But why are your eyes glowing? If you're using your quirk, my Namu is one command away from killing those two, Shigaraki said lowly, pointing at the teachers. I'm not using my quirk. The glowing eyes are just a side effect. And whatever. Now stand still. What? Luckily his instincts kicked in as he teleported away just as a gun was shot at him. He chose to reappear by the Namu thingy where his teachers were pinned down. But it seemed like the bioengineered creature rushed to Shigaraki's aid since the bullet that Izuku dodged would have hit him instead. With that large thing gone, Izuku took the opportunity to save his teachers. He got close to the unconscious adults and let 2 void orbs transport them to the 1A classroom. Now that the main objective was taken care of, he just needed to teleport his classmates. Just as he was about to grasp his void orb, the Namu grabbed him by his torso and slammed him to the ground harshly before pinning his hands. He groaned, but there didn't seem to be any broken bones. Stay down, brat. Tranquilize him now. Izuku closed his eyes, thinking about how it would hurt. But the pain never came. Instead, there was a rush of cold wind behind him. The sounds of his classmates rallying to battle shook Izuku out of his daze. Ice slowly crept up the Namu that had him pinned, and he was able to break free with a well-timed kick. He stood up beside Shoto and Kaken as everyone else fought the mob of villains. Izuku hypothesized that this Namu and Shigaraki would be the most troublesome to deal with. His classmates are all great in their own ways, but the 3 of them are the most combat ready. Izuku fixed his stance and glanced at his friends with a determined expression. You better be ready when we defeat your ugly face, you fucker. Your toy was easily destroyed. What's up with that? The villain didn't seem to acknowledge Kakin as he just restlessly scratched his neck. Kids nowadays are such pains in the ass. Namu, kill them, but leave that green-haired brat. To their horror, the giant figure that was dismembered moments ago regenerated its lost limbs rapidly and stood before them. Before it could hurt his friends, Izuku immediately came close to it and let his void energy envelop the figure. It took approximately 3 seconds, and the Namu was luckily too shocked with what's happening to its body to respond. Now with the hulking gone, Shoto shot a burst of ice towards Shigaraki at the same time that Kakin charged for an explosion. Their attacks never connected though, since a black portal coalesced in front of the villain to protect him. Kurogiri, where did that brat transport my Namu? I must say, I have no idea. Tamura Shigaraki, the warp villain, Kurogiri said. Izuku had no idea how this villain uses his warp quirk, and he appeared to be completely gaseous. Looking at his watch, they still have 2 minutes left. They needed to stall these villains and prevent them from running away. With a nod to his friends, the 3 of them charged together. The villain Kurogiri must have seen it coming because he created 2 portals that separated his friends from him. Shoto-kun, Kakin. His slight distraction was used by the villain to also envelop him in a black mist. In a panicked state, Izuku tossed a void orb at the mist, and the villain's quirk disappeared. This development startled both Izuku and the villains. His quirk, it could counteract Kurogiri's power. Now that he knew how to deal with that troublesome villain, he only needed to worry about Shigaraki. He still had no idea about the villain's quirk. With a few taps on his bracer, he created a void orb and aimed it at the blue-haired man. The bracers on his wrist has the ability to push his void orbs with the speed of sound using wind pressure. Kurogiri blocked the projectiles though, counteracting the Izuku's warp with his own. Shigaraki backed away to a safe distance, while the mist villain took all the attacks. Izuku finally decided to just get close and teleported a few steps away from Shigaraki. He was about to attack when the villain suddenly spoke. So Midoriya, tell me, why do you want to become a hero? Is it to make up for your failure of saving your mother, or is it the only way paved to you by Island? The blue-haired villain asked with a feral grin. The question caught Izuku off guard as he thought about it. Why did he become a hero again? Was his reason so selfish and shallow all this time? Looking around him, he could see his classmates fighting for their lives, and he's not helping them. It was supposed to be his duty as class rep. He was about to turn back and help, but a sharp pain on his forearm stopped him. There was a tranquilizer bullet embedded on him. How foolish of him. He allowed Shigaraki a free shot by staying still like a dumbass. He felt his body tumble to the floor as drowsiness hit him. Ieyasu had already assembled all of the teachers inside the classroom of 1A. Everyone was quite surprised when she just unceremoniously crashed into each room she came across. But when the staff learned of the dire circumstance happening in USJ at the moment, they didn't question her. The unconscious Mr. Aizawa and 13 were already sent to Recovery Girl when they found them inside. But 3 minutes have already passed since the alarm on her watch rang. Midoriya still hasn't created the portal, and everyone was getting antsy. What was happening in the facility right now? Even with growing worry, all they could do was trust Midoriya. But every passing moment really was torture. Their only hope was the wellness of everyone, even in this dreadful situation. Ieyasu has been skeptical of Midoriya's plan from the start. According to the class rep, he would distribute the conflagration team throughout the facility to assist their classmate. He sent Todoroki to help the Ruins team after seeing their predicament. Kirishima was tasked to protect Hagakure, who was hiding in the central plaza, and Aoyama informed the mountain team of the plan. The central part of the mission was left for the class rep and deputy. Midoriya planned to confront the villains and stall enough time for Ieyasu to assemble the staff inside the 1A classroom. I can still visualize what our room looks like. Since it's empty apart from the chairs and tables, no one will disturb the creation of my portal, he told them. But it will be risky to confront those villains alone. They want you, Midoriya. Our mission will be a failure if they capture you. Ieyasu tried to reason. There's no way we're letting you go alone, Zuko. You'll need backup, especially with one of the villains having a warp quirk. Midoriya smiled reassuringly. I'll be fine, Shoto-kun. Please trust me, guys. We can save everyone. There was no way they could convince Midoriya to simply back down. Ieyasu sighed. At least take this. She handed him a small watch. I set it so that my own timer would go off at the same time with yours. 10 minutes. That's your deadline. Deadline? To open a portal to 1A? Midoriya asked as he put it on his wrist. Ieyasu nodded. Yes, if you don't open a portal at that time, I'll send the backup old-fashioned way. Their class rep nodded and shook her hand. No words were needed to convey the trust they bestowed upon each other as Midoriya opened portals for each of them. The conflagration team went on their separate ways, and Ieyasu wasted no time to get out of the 1A classroom. Cold sweat ran down her forehead as she opened the door to Class 1B. MS. Midnight. There's an emergency in the USJ. We're under attack by villains and Midoriya sent me here to get back up. It took about 2 seconds for Class 1B to comprehend why Ieyasu interrupted their class. They shouted their questions, but Midnight fully understood it and pressed an emergency alarm beneath the desk. Let's go. I've alerted the staff. Everyone should be outside within 3 minutes, Midnight said as she led Ieyasu through the halls. Wait, actually, Midoriya wanted everyone to assemble inside the 1A classroom. He'll open a portal there in 9 minutes, she explained quickly. Midnight seemed to have weighted her choices before replying. Okay, you go ahead to your room and tell every teacher you come across with. I'll go to the principal's office since he's the only one that can tell everyone about the change in plan. Ieyasu didn't see any teacher on her way. She didn't even realize that she sat down on Midoriya's seat as she kept fidgeting with her watch. At the 6-minute mark, a sound of ripping paper and a flash of green light startled Ieyasu out of her stupor. At the front of the room, Mr. Aizawa and 13 were laid unconscious. This was good news. Midoriya had succeeded on his part of the mission. She kneeled down beside the heroes and checked their pulse. It was relatively normal, and they had no visible injuries. Ieyasu's sigh of relief was cut off by the 1A door opening harshly. Several members of the staff stood dumbfounded at the sight of the girl examining their fellow teachers. How did they get here? What happened? Midoriya teleported them here. It was part of his plan, she explained. Everyone nodded and All Might crouched down next to her. We'll take them to Recovery Girl. Mike, carry Aizawa. I'll handle 13. Ieyasu didn't reply as the 2 men whisked away the unconscious teachers. Instead, she looked at the rest of the staff. Please don't hinder the front of the classroom. Midoriya will open a portal here within 3 minutes. All the adults sat down on the chairs as they waited for the portal. Tension was heavy in the air. The only sound Ieyasu could hear was the violent beating in her chest, and the occasional cough from who knows who. Her watch showed that there was still a minute before Midoriya's deadline. Ieyasu, do you know why the villains attacked USJ? Midnight asked somewhere beside her. She sighed heavily just as All Might and Present Mike returned from the clinic. They surely wouldn't like the answer to that question. Yes, the villains announced in the PAW system that their only objective was to capture Midoriya. There was a beat of silence before the teachers shouted a collective, "What? He's the target, and he chose to stay behind there. What is that kid thinking?" Snipe said in disbelief. That's it. I'm going ahead, All Might announced as he stood up. Wait, All Might. The ring of Ieyasu's watch startled the noisy argument of the adults. That's Midoriya's deadline. He should be here anytime, so please trust our class rep. She stood up and bowed deeply to teachers. He risked everything so that no one will be left behind. The adults looked at each other and decided to trust their student. All Might, who was the most affected of the situation, also agreed with Ieyasu. You're right, kid. Izuku is a tough fighter and strategist. The villains wouldn't know what hit them. Ieyasu ignored the hero's familiarity over her classmate. She knew the logical thing to do was to just send the heroes on their way rather than wait for Midoriya. After all, they agreed that if he failed to comply with the deadline, Ieyasu wouldn't wait for the portal any longer. But she had faith in their class rep. He said he'll open a portal, so Ieyasu would wait for him. Todoroki groaned as he stood up from the hard ground. That warp villain transported him away from the fight just as he charged at the blue-haired guy. What an annoying quirk to go against. Beside him, Bakugo was also clearly upset. If his loud curses about the bastard purple gas villain was anything to go by. Looks like the villain warped them to the ruined zone, the farthest zone from the central plaza. Getting back to the center of the action would be difficult and time-consuming. Luckily, both he and Bakugo have great mobility with their quirks. Hey, half and half. Zuko's reckless ass needs help, so try to keep up. He didn't need to be told twice as he raced towards the fountain using his eyes. The scenery around them kept changing in a smudge of colors, considering the speed they were using to immediately reach Zuko. Buildings and fallen debris were easily bypassed by the pair, and before long, the sounds of battle could be heard by the both of them. Todoroki spotted the black costume of Zuko from afar, and it wasn't hard to tell that the boy was unconscious. Distract them. I'll get Zuko. Don't you fucking command me half and half. Despite Bakugo's pride, the blonde still followed Todoroki's instructions and made a mad dash towards the villains. With a well-aimed blast, he was able to draw away the warp villain and the blue-haired villain. Todoroki took that opportunity to scoop Zuko in his arms and skate away from trouble. Along the way, he also helped immobilize the villains with his ice. He tried to wake up Zuko, but he caught sight of a tranquilizer dart on the boy's forearm. Todoroki took it out and put a thin sheet of ice on the pierced skin. Todoroki was torn between waking up Zuko and just letting him rest. On one hand, the last part of the plan needed Zuko's portal so that backup from the main campus could arrive. On the other hand, his friend really needed a break from all the stress in the world. A huge burden was placed on his shoulders when these villains announced that they were after him. Looking at the chaos of USJ, Todoroki knew that they needed Zuko's help for all of this to be over. His classmates valiantly fought villains, and Bakugo kept the most dangerous ones at bay with the help of Kirishima, Ida, and Takoyami. If he chose to wake up Zuko, it's not like the tranquilizer used on him would just suddenly disappear. He lightly smacked Zuko's face repeatedly. Zuko, wake up. I know that you'd be upset if I just let you sleep during this chaos. Todoroki immediately noticed the green hue glowing beneath Zuko's skin. It didn't take long for the boy to open his eyelids, and toxic green eyes stared straight through Todoroki. He tried to ignore the shiver that went down his spine. Zuko, are you okay? The boy didn't reply as he stood up like nothing was wrong, and walked away from Todoroki. He gazed at the fighting students and villains before tossing 2 void orbs on either side of him. 2 portals were formed, and out came the reinforcements from the campus. Class 1A cheered at the sight of their teachers, while the villains all cowered away. Midoriya, you made us so worried. Ieyasu cried as she hugged Zuko. She must have found it rude that he didn't hug back, based on her concerned face. Todoroki, what's wrong with Midoriya? Todoroki was slightly confused as to what was wrong, so he stood next to Zuko. His friend's eyes were blank and lifeless, and small streaks of green energy leaked out of his costume. He was hit by a tranquilizer. I don't even know how he woke up. Wouldn't the chemicals present in the tranquilizer react with the pain medication he took? Midoriya's quirk is volatile. A reaction like that could be catastrophic. Suddenly, the sound of Zuko's portals closing echoed through the USJ, despite all the fight and chaos. It gave everyone an inkling of the ominous aura coming from the green-haired boy. Please run, was the only warning Ieyasu and Todoroki were given. Everybody take cover. Todoroki managed to create an ice shield for Ieyasu and himself, just as a burst of green energy surged out from Zuko. He doesn't know how long it lasted, but the sound of tearing paper kept assaulting his ears. Todoroki only hoped that everyone else was okay, despite the late warning Ieyasu shouted. When the USJ became eerily quiet, Todoroki risked a glimpse past the shield he created. The middle of the main plaza, where dozens of villains were fighting off his classmates and teachers, was completely devoid of anyone. Panic began to bubble in his gut at the thought of everyone disappearing. But that worry was completely crushed by the shout of Kaminari. What the hell just happened? Looking behind him where the voice came from, Todoroki spotted his classmates and teachers grouped together like nothing happened. Everyone was confused with the situation, and the reason of all the mayhem was passed out on the floor, with excess green energy beginning to fade away. Following the attack on UA, several dozens of criminals and low-ranked villains simultaneously appeared in different police stations earlier today. According to an insider in UA High, these criminals were the same ones that attacked USJ. The criminals were all imprisoned due to multiple felonies and awaiting the verdict of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Meanwhile, the head of the school, Principal Nezu, has yet to release an official statement regarding the attack. On other news, the Grim Chamber became silent with the last flicker of the television screen. Wires, tanks, and other medical equipment littered the dark room. Only a lone potted cactus gave a hint that someone was living here. But even the plant was as dry as the atmosphere of this lair. So, what do you think, Doctor? A rough voice asked with a trace of amusement. The doctor in question, who was standing beside the large eyeless man, chuckled lightly. I didn't think the boy's quirk would be this powerful. And to think the only weakness of his power is the presence of other warp users. I'd have a field day when I can finally examine him. Yes, indeed. I thought my spies from my island were exaggerating his quirk. But it turns out, they weren't even aware of its potential in battle. The doctor hummed. But what of the Namu that we created to counter All Might? That thing, the Namu has always been expendable. I made it as strong as All Might for one purpose, to see how it measures up to the boy's quirk. In theory, that bioengineered monster could match All Might in speed and power, but the boy's warp quirk was able to bypass those traits. With Relocate in my disposal, getting rid of All Might and his successor would be easy, not to mention the other capabilities of that boy's power. I've never seen you so interested with a quirk before. The man smiled at the observation. Oh yes, who wouldn't be interested with the power to connect with every corner of the universe? Izuku opened his eyes to a hazy, yet familiar apartment. The walls were decorated with silly drawings of heroes and costumes, all of which he recognized as his own. Is this my old home? His thoughts were immediately answered by a voice coming from the kitchen. A soft feminine voice, nearly forgotten by the living. It was his mom. Izuku, honey, do you want to be a hero? The boy, a younger version of himself, Izuku realized, looked away from the picture he was drawing. I want to be a hero that saves everyone. Izuku cringed at his naivety. Everyone? Suddenly, the scene before him faded into a more painful memory. A pole skewered his mother, blood pouring from the hole in her chest. The tiny Izuku ran towards her. Izuku couldn't bear to relive this memory, so he looked away from the scene, only to come face to face with a grinning Shigaraki. So Midoriya, tell me, why do you want to become a hero? Izuku couldn't breathe. He tried using his quirk, but it won't activate. He backed away from the villain, failing to notice the background becoming gradually darker with each step. Please stay away. Is it to make up for your failure of saving your mother, or is it the only way paved to you by 𝐸. The villain continued, still smiling sadistically. Nothing works. He tried backing away, but then there was a wall behind him. His quirk, oh gosh, his quirk wouldn't listen to him. He scratched and scratched at his palms, hoping for his skin to make way for his void orbs. They never came. Shigaraki was looking down on him, his hands gripping Izuku's arms. Is it to make up for your failure of saving your mother, or is it the only way paved to you by 𝐸? He repeated. Izuku closed his eyes, willing the nightmare to end. No, stay away from me. Suddenly, the echoing voices of Shigaraki disappeared. He opened his eyes, and this time, he was sitting inside a clinic. He was pretty sure that this must be the real world now, considering he could create void orbs unlike from his dream. Beside Izuku was the sleeping form of his sister. Wait, his sister. He was still in Japan, right? He could vividly remember this room being the clinic of Recovery Girl. So did his family came to visit him. He lightly shook Melissa. Lee-san, wake up. Why are you in Japan right now? The blonde girl smacked Izuku's hand, eliciting a loud ouch from him. Sleep, Izuku. Save your overthinking for tomorrow. Dad has something for you. Dad has something for me. What is it? Wait, actually, what happened to everyone? Are they okay? Is someone injured? Melissa looked at him with sleepy eyes. Everyone's fine. Now sleep or I will disable all your gadgets. Okay, I'll sleep. You're scary when you threaten me like that, you know. Izuku pouted and leaned back on his bed. His sister easily dozed off, judging by her light snores, but he couldn't find it in himself to be sleepy. Lee-san told him that everyone was all right, but he couldn't stop worrying. The villains were after him, and if his classmates got hurt because he refused to be captured, he wouldn't forgive himself. Not to mention, Shigaraki's words still haunt him. He felt guilty for using his mom's death as his sole driving force to become a hero. It felt like he was just giving himself an excuse to his failure of saving her. Even if he was able to save countless lives, it wouldn't be able to measure to the death of his mother. He knows that he should save people because it's the true essence of being a hero, and not just so he can ease his guilt. To be a competent hero, he would start to look at his job as saving those in need, rather than people that could balance his debt to the deceased.